Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto had the power of NOLIFE Queen and awakens the kyuubi's chakra. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. The sounds of explosions and battle cries was heard through the normally peaceful valley of the end. The two boys that were the cause of the noises were no more than 12 years old and both were fighting with everything at their disposal. The child on the left wore an ugly orange jumpsuit, come on you know it is, with a red swirl on his left bicep, blue sandals on his feet and a blue headband on his forehead with a metal plate with his village symbol on it, showing his allegiance to Konohagakure. He also had hair that was bright yellow and looked like a sea urchin. He also had sapphire-colored eyes that showed innocence and courage. The other boy was his opposite in nearly every way. The only similarity between the boys were their age and the headband on their foreheads. He had black hair styled like the tail end of a duck. He wore a dark blue shirt with a red and white fan on the back, the symbol of his clan, the Uchiha. He also wore a white pair of shorts that stopped just above the knee. His eyes were blood red and had 3 commas slowly rotating around the pupil. The most saddening thing were, as most boys his age would have eyes filled with joy, happiness, or laughter, his eyes were filled with nothing but rage and insanity. These boys were Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. While they were both fighting for two completely opposite causes, they did have one thing in common when it came to how they were fighting. They were both drawing power from a source that was not their own. Naruto was drawing chakra from the 9-tailed fox spirit sealed in his stomach, while Sasuke was drawing his power from the cursed seal placed on him by the snake Sannin Orochimaru. One thing came to each boy's mind at the exact same moment, and that was that they were almost out of strength left to use. I suppose this is it, isn't it, Dobi? Sasuke said with his usual arrogant smirk. Sasuke, why do you want to Orochimaru? You know he just wants to take your Sharingan. Naruto shouted, trying to get through to his mentally unstable ex-comrade. And he'll also give me power. That's all the promise I need to leave Konoha. My hate isn't enough to kill my brother, and Konoha can't give me the power to kill him. Sasuke said. How can you be so idiotic? Orochimaru gained all of his power in Konoha. He was born, raised, and trained there, Naruto shouted, trying to convince his teammate. That doesn't matter. All that matters is a small taste of what Orochimaru can offer me is enough to match you, and I will become strong enough to beat anyone that gets in my way. Sasuke shouted again, this time with all sanity in his eyes and voice being washed away by rage, hatred, and arrogance. This time Naruto had nothing to say, as he could finally see that his comrade, the person that, for a short time, he had thought of as a brother, was gone, and in his place was a monster that needed to be put down. Alright Sasuke, I can see you won't go back to the village, but I can't let you go to Orochimaru either. As much as I want you to come back and remake Team 7 with Sakura, Kakashi-sensei, and it's obvious that won't happen. For your own good I have to kill you. Naruto spoke with a sad tone, which, given that he was still covered in the kyuubi's chakra, which was literally nothing but pure rage given life, said a lot about how disheartened Naruto was seeing Sasuke like he was. Do you really think you can kill me, Dobi? I graduated at the top of the class and you at the bottom. I am from a clan of elites while you're an orphan. What makes you think you can beat me? Sasuke shouted, regaining his usual arrogant tone. He then put all the chakra he had left into a chidori, turning it pitch black with the corrupted chakra of the cursed seal. Because I made a promise to save you, Sasuke, and I never break my word. If saving you means killing you, then that's what I'll do. Naruto shouted, putting all the chakra he had left into a Rasengan, turning the Rasengan blood red with the kyuubi's chakra that he had fueling him. On an unspoken signal they both leapt to the center of the field, and when they clashed time stood still for a second as they looked into each other's eyes. Sasuke's filled with the usual rage, but Naruto's were filled with nothing but pity and remorse. Pity that his best friend and brother had become something akin to a rabid animal, and remorse that Sasuke couldn't be saved. There was a bright flash and an explosion, but when the smoke cleared neither Naruto nor Sasuke were there. The answer as to why this happened is that the kyuubi, in a rage that his vessel was fighting with the descendant of the person he hated most in this world, Uchiha Madara, and might lose. So the instant their attacks met, kyuubi sent all of his chakra as he could into the, hoping that it would either overload the seal that bound it in its cage or that it would kill the Uchiha. He got his desire, but what he didn't know was the effect the seal would have. The seal was made to slowly and safely drain its chakra and give it to its vessel, but when he shoved it past the seal it damaged it, but not the way it would have hoped. When the chakra went past it, the seal sped into overdrive and converted all of the kyuubis into Narutos and also drew the beast itself into the seal. In its bid to escape, it gave itself eternal freedom. The Rasengan takes a precise amount of chakra to function properly in its standard version, but Naruto suddenly felt his already immense chakra levels multiply 100-fold. The Rasengan he was saying was so overpowered that with the clashing of Naruto new immensely powerful Rasengan coupled with the corrupted chakra Sasuke was using ripped a hole in the fabric of space-time itself. Both boys were flung through millions of years and dimensions all within 1 second. Normally this would confuse people because their brains couldn't process that much information that quickly, but unfortunately for Naruto he had practice dealing with sorting through memories quickly because of him constantly using his shadow clone jutsu. The explosion that created the rip also severely injured both boys, and while Naruto gained incredible regeneration from absorbing the kyuubi, the mental backlash from viewing millions of places all in the span of 1 second put him under severe mental strain. Sasuke on the other hand did not have a way to repair his body, and the moment they both landed on the ground he succumbed to his wounds and died. Naruto while alive was having an immense migraine, and the last thing he saw before he blacked out was a couple of men running his way holding what he thought were metal sticks with an unsharpened pike at one end that they held. He would never have think he would fall into a coma that he wouldn't wake up from for 4 years. 4 years later Naruto was just starting to regain consciousness. The first thing he heard was the steady beeping of hospital equipment. When he started to open his eyes he quickly learned that he was pointed directly at a window that the sun just so happened to be in front of. After letting his eyes adjust to the light he opened them again and grated by the sight of a raven-haired beauty that instantly made his cheeks go red. He couldn't help but stare at her, and the distance gave him the opportunity to see her entire body. She was slim, about 6 feet tall for a woman but still very attractive. She wore an all-white suit and had a woman's fur hat on her. Two things that really caught his attention were her face and chest. She was wearing a smile on her face that, while normally innocent looking, was still very intimidating given her sharp, shark-like teeth. And her eyes, they looked like they were made out of amber with 3 rings jing out from her pupils. He thought they were beautiful. The other thing that caught his attention was her chest. It was huge. The suit she wore was obviously made for a woman with a very large chest, and it looked like buttons were about to pop off. They're twice as big as Ba-chan's, Naruto thought. He then started to take in his environment other than the sexy lady in the suit, as he is calling her at the moment. There was really nothing he could make out about his location because of one of the many curses of hospitals. They all looked the same. When he looked back at the woman that was still standing by the door he finally asked, "Where am I?" The woman's huge and frightening grin stayed as she told him, "You are in the hospital wing of the Helsing Manor, and now that you are awake my master would like to ask you some questions." Naruto's answer was just a sigh and a nod as he was still waking up. He did have a thought run through his mind though, and that was, what the hell have I gotten myself into this time? How are ya doing? I went on a surprise camping trip, and I mean surprise. I was told to pack my crap and go. It's good to be home and not hauling 30 crabs out of the water a day. Alright, so after some thought I decided that Femme Alucard's name would be Morgana because like Alucard it isn't a name that you commonly hear when it comes to vampires, and it still manages to not sound like some random name. Thanks to Hanipman for the Femme Alucard's name, Shadow Jubi Overlord for the names for Naruto's guns. And to all others who tried to help. Thank ya. Helsing is owned by Kutra Hirano and Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto. I would also like to say that Naruto is not a demon, he just has an infinite amount of chakra now. He just gained all of the kyuubi's chakra and made it his own. With that being said, vote for your choice on whether Naruto becomes a vampire or not in your reviews. Guests do not count. Sorry. Naruto waited in silence, just waiting for the woman to return with her master. He didn't quite understand that she didn't look like a slave or a servant. Naruto just let it go and tried to get answers when she returned with her master. In the time he laid in his hospital bed he thought about many things. Where was he? Was it enemy territory? If he was, how would he get home? Would he have to fight his way out? The door suddenly opened and in walked a tall woman in a black business suit, quickly followed by someone who he could only assume was her butler. The woman that he saw earlier however wasn't with them and made him wonder why he was disappointed that she wasn't there. He discovered that he was in fact a butler when he was told by the woman to go and get her some tea to drink. As the man left, the woman turned to him and after several minutes finally spoke. "Well, I suppose I will have to start the conversation. For starters, who are you?" The woman bluntly asked. Naruto, being the smart ass that he was the vast majority of the time, decided to respond, "Isn't it polite to give your own name before asking for someone theirs?" The woman, while obviously not happy about this, still told Naruto her full name, "Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingets Helsing, now that you know my name it's your turn." Naruto gave his usual giant grin and replied, "Naruto Uzumaki, Genin of Konohagakure." He said this with as much enthusiasm as an impatient child wanting his favorite treat. At his extremely happy reply, Integra couldn't help but grow a small grin of her own. "Well, you currently don't seem like you even need to be in this hospital bed anymore. I don't feel like I should even be in here. I feel great." Naruto was strangely happy at this point for some reason. He couldn't understand why, but he felt that he didn't need to worry about being hated for things beyond his control. At this point he decided to see if he could stand up on his own or he would need some help. He was happy to see that this was easily accomplished. Integra was surprised that he could move his legs at all with him not moving them for 4 years. She nearly had a heart attack when she saw him standing, without any help whatsoever. If she hadn't had a blood test done to see if he was human, she would have thought he was a vampire. Although Naruto was still curious as to where he was, a thought crossed his mind. "Excuse me, by any chance did a black-haired boy land here with me?" Integra's face suddenly lost the shocked look that it had and gained a serious one. "Yes, he was already dead and we didn't know if he was a vampire or not. We burned his body and threw the ashes into a river." Naruto's expression suddenly became one of relief. "Good, I was afraid the crazy bastard had survived." "Wait, what's a vampire?" "A vampire is something that feeds on the blood of others to survive. Normally this would cause us to want to kill anyone we see, but we have an arrangement with one, and that is if she kills Rouge vampires first, then we shall not try to kill her." Integra didn't want to tell him that she was actually the Helsing family's slave until she knew he wouldn't do anything. "Anyway, you're obviously well enough to move around, so you don't need any medical treatment. You won't fit in any clothes of the clothes you were wearing, so Walter will bring you some soon." With that said, she left the room and Naruto was alone for a few minutes. While Naruto waited for his clothes, he started thinking about what he had learned. Vampires. He didn't think that there was anything like that in Konoha, and if they were as big of a threat as Integra had made them out to be, then everyone would know about them back home. Naruto was beginning to suspect that he wasn't anywhere near Konoha. Then he suddenly remembered the multiple flashes of images that he saw before he blacked out. He suddenly realized 2 things. 1, he was sent to another dimension, and 2, he felt taller than he remembered. Naruto then noticed a mirror on a table a few feet away and decided to look into it. What he saw made him shout in surprise. He was older, not by much, but still he had aged a good 4 years. His hair had grown extremely long while he was out of it. It reached to his lower back. Nothing else really changed. Just then Walter came back into the room and gave Naruto a plain white t-shirt and a pair of jeans. When he looked in the mirror after he got dressed, it occurred to him that the clothes he was given looked very plain. He was wondering where he could get some clothes that he would want to wear when the old man spoke for the first time. "If you are dissatisfied with your clothing, we can easily get you more in a day or 2. Naruto, still not really trusting anyone until he got more information on where he was, just nodded. He still didn't know what these people wanted from him for the medical attention, or if they could be trusted for that matter. Just then Integra walked back inside and started telling him that they needed to get his shoe size. "A 10.5, I have a few questions of my own to ask you," Naruto stated. He was going to get his answers or just leave. "Very well, I will answer your questions depending on what they are," Integra replied. "All right, where am I?" "England. Is there any work for someone with combat training?" "Yes, several. Where is the closest one that won't ask questions about my past?" "You're standing in its headquarters. Got a position I could fill." This was the first good bit of luck Naruto had had in a while. He didn't have a job, a place to stay, or money, and he just happened to land in a place that could probably give him the first 2 at the price of most, if not all of the third. Even if he wouldn't get any money he wouldn't complain. He didn't know anything about the world he was in. He just hoped he could work here. Wherever here was didn't really matter because it seemed like he would never get back to Konoha, and this Hellsing organization seemed to kill things that sound like they would normally kill every living thing that they set their sights on. We always have new positions to fill, Integra replied with a smirk. She may just get a new and by the looks of things very powerful new warrior to battle all of the freaks and monsters with. So when do I start? Naruto asked. Right now. I have things I need to do, but in the meantime go look around the manor. I'll call you on the intercom when I have your first mission ready. Just stay away from my room. Integra replied, and with her piece said she left the room. Naruto quickly gathered his thoughts and decided to do as she said and started exploring his new place of employment. Naruto was just walking through the manor trying to familiarize himself with the area when he noticed a small line going down a wall. He followed it up and then it curved to the side and went down again. He quickly realized this was an entrance, so he decided to open it. He saw what looked like the entrance to a dungeon, and against every shred of common sense that he had started going down the torchlit stone staircase. Eventually he came across a room that had nothing in it but a table, a bottle of wine that was actually filled with blood, and a chair. And in that chair was the woman that he had talked to when he first woke up. Thankfully this time her suit didn't look like it would break apart. She still had a massive smile on her face, but this time it wasn't that bad because her teeth were normal sized as opposed to teeth that looked like they would go well in a Tyrannosaurus Rex's mouth. If anything now it just looked mischievous, a lot like his own grin now that he thought about it. He was pulled out of his musing by the woman. I'm surprised no one has ever found this place unless they already knew about it. She said. In my old profession you had to catch the slightest thing out of place on just a glance or you could fall into a deadly trap. Naruto replied. That's interesting. What was your profession? She asked. Well, it was in another dimension, so I doubt you could find anything similar here, but I was a ninja, and I'm sorry to change the subject so suddenly, but I never got your name. Naruto said. The woman's grin grew bigger. I suppose I haven't told you yet, have I? My name is Morgana. It's nice to meet you, Morgana. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Likewise. Not that it wasn't nice to officially meet you. The armory is down the hall and you could use some guns. Morgana told him. All right, it was nice meeting you. Naruto shouted as he ran out of the room. Things will certainly be more amusing with him around. At least he is much more pleasing to look at than everyone I have ever met, really. Morgana thought to herself with her usual borderline arrogant confident way, but towards the end confused. 1. Naruto made his was through the hall he was directed through and eventually came to a huge room, and what he saw in the room both exited and frightened him. There were shelves upon shelves stuffed to the brim with weapons. He suddenly remembered that he had no kunai or shuriken and he didn't think that he would find any here. He was about to leave when he saw two things that caught his eye. It was a pair of desert eagles. One was gold and the other was black. He picked them up and quickly figured out how to use them, along with putting a small hole in the wall. He took them to the shooting range that was built into the armory. He then proceeded to blow gaping in the targets. When he finished, there was more bullets left in Naruto's guns than there was gel left on the target dummies. Naruto then grinned, but before he could have more fun the intercom started up and he heard Integra's voice. Naruto, your first mission will begin soon. Morgana, you will be going as well. The intercom then went off and Naruto couldn't help but grin at the fact that not only was he already working, but his first job was with Morgana. He didn't know why, but he felt like he could trust her, both in the field or about everyday things that he wanted to tell someone. Naruto, Morgana, Integra, and a few of her unnamed and unimportant soldiers were on their way to Cheddar. During the trip, Morgana took note of Naruto's dual desert eagles and told him that those were meant for someone whose body could hold much more stress than a human's could. He just smirked and told her that before they were told about their mission he had destroyed a good amount of their practice dummies. Morgana's response to this was to grin and say that if he could do that without any problems then his body was far stronger than any normal human's was and that she would love to spar with him sometime. Naruto just grinned and rapidly shook his head up and down, something that greatly amused both Morgana and Integra. Eventually they landed and started heading in the direction of the village of Cheddar. When they got to a crossroad, Integra turned to Morgana and Naruto and said, Now I want you two to go to what remains of the village of Cheddar and kill the vampire that has killed the population." Naruto and Morgana just nodded and they separated from the others. They kept walking until they found their target, an ugly man who was molesting a police girl. Normally this would have pissed Naruto off to the point where he would just charge in and beat the crap out of rapist, but the small army of ghouls surrounding him made that just a bit difficult. However, he couldn't stop the angry look that appeared on his face. It was then that Morgana made their presence known by releasing a fraction of a percent of her power. The vampire was worried, but when he saw that it was just two people he got his cockiness back. His grin damn near split his face when he saw Morgana. He was about to say something stupid when Naruto shot him in the heart with an enraged look on his face. This made Morgana grin for two reasons. One, because she saw the look too and was disgusted that such a weak, little, idiotic vampire thought that he could have her and he just got a bullet through the heart, and two, she saw the look of rage on his face just before he shot the little bastard, meaning he cared about her. But then she frowned because she felt a strange warm feeling in her chest and thought to herself, I will have to ask Master about this later. He didn't like rapists, that much was obvious, but if that was all that angered him, then why, when the vampire had such a lustful gleam in his eyes, did he go from angry to just plain pissed off? It was then that they both realized something. The vampire, in a pathetic and cowardly attempt to live, had tried to use the police girl in his grasp as a shield to block the bullet. She did block the bullet, for all of 1 millisecond. It went straight through her and then through the vampire's heart, but this whole thing reignited Naruto's rage, and in a flash he was in front of the vampire shoving a Rasengan through his head, and torso, and pretty much everything else too. In the end all that was left was a bloody smear on the ground. With their master dead, the ghouls just fell to the ground and truly died. However, neither of the Hellsing operatives were watching this. They were focused on the police girl that was dying in front of them. "The bullet tore through your heart, you dying," Morgana told the girl. "I'm sorry the bastard used you as a shield, but I saw a shot and I took it. I really wish you weren't hit," Naruto stated with genuine remorse clearly showed on his face. The girl couldn't talk, but the look in her slowly dimming eyes told him that she understood. "There is a way to save you, but you would never be human again. You would be a Draculina. A creature of the night that feeds on the essence of the living. You would feed off their blood," Morgana told her with a grin on her face. She didn't know why, but despite not even talking to this girl, she already liked her. Maybe it was because she so readily accepted death like she has wanted to for so long. This train of thought suddenly ended when a strange voice in her head, too, suddenly said, "But you don't want to just die anymore, you want to see what it's like to truly live." "What does that mean exactly?" Morgana asked the voice. "You'll learn one of these days," the voice said with a chuckle at the end. This confused Morgana, but then she got back on topic. "Is that something you are willing to accept?" The girl used all the strength she had left to nod, and with that Morgana did two things. She told the police girl that tonight was a very beautiful night, and she lowered her mouth to the girl's neck and bit it. Naruto just stood back, watched on and thought one thing. Things are going to get even more interesting with her around. Morgana seems like she could use a friend. Alright, first off, I have gotten like 3 comments on Naruto being as strong as Morgana. He isn't, he just has a freaking huge amount of chakra. He may get as strong as Morgana somewhere down the road, but not anytime soon. When Sarah's opened her eyes, she expected to see either a large pearl gate or a huge pit of flame. What she actually saw, however, left her incredibly confused. She just saw was a badly drawn cartoon world that looked like a little kid could have drawn. Then she saw something that terrified her. An angry mob of ghouls. She was terrified at first, but then they said something that took her fear to a whole new level. "Hey, it's a cop, a police girl, get her." What happened next was hilarious. She spent a good 30 seconds just running around, flailing her arms above her head, trying to get away from the mob of ghouls with a dust cloud underneath it. She suddenly turned directions and ran for 3 more seconds, but then she hit something incredibly soft. She looked up and saw the woman who she talked to before she died. She then looked down and blushed heavily when she saw what she ran into. The woman surprised her when she gained a grin and began speaking. "So police girl, how does it feel now that you're dead?" the woman asked with an enormous grin on her face. Sarah's was confused at first. She had no idea what she was talking about,
but then she looked down and saw an enormous hole blown through the right side of her torso.
At this point she did the only thing she could think of. She screamed, and promptly bolted upright in bed. She lifted her shirt to see if she still had a hole in her chest. She let out a sigh of relief when she saw she was fine. Then she saw Morgana sitting at her bedside, the grin already on her face becoming even bigger. They stayed like this for a few minutes and then Sarah's let out a very loud, "AHHHHHHHHH." As if that being a signal, Integra walked in. "You're too loud, police girl. I don't care if you are a vampire, you're still British, have some manners," Integra stated, all the while smoking one of her cigars. Sarah's answer to that was a groan. She waited a few seconds then asked, "So I'm a vampire?" "Sorry, but where am I?" "This is our headquarters. We are called the Helsing Organization. We are the monsters that protect England from the other monsters," Integra stated in a tone that clearly said she was proud that her organization was the only thing keeping England safe.
Sarah's was incredibly confused. "So you're telling me, you're saying that she was cut off before she could finish."
"Given your condition, you'll be working for us from now on. We've received word of a string of vampire attacks. Go and kill the vampire, police girl. You will be accompanied by Morgana and Naruto," Integra spoke with a sense of finality. "Naruto? Who is that?" Sarah's asked. "He is the one that accidentally shot you," Morgana said, jumping into the conversation. "At the moment he is looking for a suitable set of blades, something about kunai not being good enough anymore." "What's a kunai?" Sarah's asked in confusion. "I believe it's a Japanese style of knife," Morgana stated. "Well, he has a mission that he needs to go on. He is probably still in the armory. Let's go get him and properly introduce him to the third strongest member of the Helsing Organization," Integra said as they all began to make their way to the armory, Morgana moving rather quickly. This caught the attention of both Integra and Walter. Morgana would normally just go back to waiting or go and wait by the helicopter. They both knew Morgana very well and both quickly came to the realization that she had some form of feelings for the blonde and they were still growing. Their reactions to this varied. Integra gained a small smile. She was glad that Morgana was finally finding someone that could give her some manner of happiness. Walter, however, gained a large frown. He had loved Morgana for a very long time, but she had never returned his feelings. Now someone just shows up and she instantly starts falling for him. He quickly began to get angry at Naruto for gaining the affection of Morgana within just a few days. Thoughts of cutting the blonde to pieces ran through his mind as he imagined killing the target of his newfound hatred. One day they would fight over who had the right to have Morgana's affection. Hint hint. Morgana decided to hide in the shadows for a few reasons. One, because she wanted to see if she could scare Naruto because she loved to see the different reactions people make, and two, because she wanted to know what Naruto would say about her. Without her in the room, they came upon Naruto leaving the armory with two simple-looking katanas. He also had two sheaths that he was strapping to his back. He then asked a question that had been bugging him since he saw them. "Not that I'm not happy that there are katanas in the armory. I thought that you wouldn't have anything other than guns and maybe a few straight-edged swords. If you don't mind me asking, why do you have them?" "I thought that an agent of Helsing would want to use them someday." "Evidently I was right," Integra said with a smirk at the end. "Fair enough, but now I have another question. What are you all doing down here?" "Morgana I can understand because she pretty much lives down here, but why are the rest of you here?" Naruto asked as he finished fastening the sheaths to his back. "You have a mission to go on. Your partners for this will be Morgana and her new fledgling, the police girl," Integra answered. Naruto was about to answer, but Sarah suddenly piped up. "Why does everyone keep calling me police girl? My name is Sarah's Victoria," Sarah shouted at the end, clearly unhappy with her nickname. "Ms. Victoria, before you depart on your mission we should first give you suitable weaponry. Follow me please, this will just be a moment," Walter said, trying to get Naruto to his mission that he could possibly get killed on. "Anyway, as I said before, Naruto, your mission is with Morgana and police girl," Integra stated, saying police girl a bit louder than she needed to make sure that Sarah's heard it in the next room. The resulting scream made it clear that she had. Naruto chuckled for a few seconds and then said, So you're telling me that I have to go on a mission to kill a vampire or two that just have a gun and nothing else going for them, and not only that but I get to go with two beautiful women. No matter what happens, this mission won't be all bad. Naruto finished with another chuckle and a smirk. Morgana, hearing this, couldn't stop blushing. He thinks I'm beautiful, Morgana thought with a slowly forming genuinely happy smile. She quickly composed herself and made her presence known. So I'm beautiful, am I? You're not that hard to look at yourself. She decided that if she should blush then he should as well, but to her surprise all he did was grin. Thank you, Morgana, it's nice to know that a goddess like yourself appreciates my compliments, Naruto stated, taking an exaggerated bow. Integra found this all extremely entertaining, but business before pleasure. As entertaining as this is, you all have a mission to take care of, she stated with barely contained mirth. Naruto and Morgana were both slightly disappointed that their fun was ended so suddenly, but both knew they had a job to do, but then they both remembered something. This was going to be an incredibly weak couple of vampires. That meant that they could keep messing with each other the entire time. They both looked at each other and grinned their own respective huge grins. At this moment Ceres walked out into the room with a simple rifle. Walter came out with a contemplative look on his face as he was looking at the rifle. You could tell he was thinking about something involving Ceres's gun, but then he looked over at Morgana and Naruto grinning at each other, and the anger that dissipated earlier came back, and it brought a couple of friends, rage and hatred. Integra was starting to get annoyed. They had been standing in the same position for about 10 seconds and it was beginning to annoy her. What are all of you waiting for? Get going, Integra yelled, finally losing her temper. With that they all made their way to the helicopter and headed out to the site of their mission. The time it took to get there was spent between Naruto and Morgana trying to get the other as flustered as possible. Ceres just watched and tried not to get involved, Integra watching the two with a small grin. Walter, however, watched the exchange between Naruto and Morgana and gritted his teeth in anger. He would make his move sooner or later. Eventually they landed on the last house that was attacked. They all walked in and began looking at the carnage. Furniture was destroyed, blood was everywhere, and there was a message on the wall written in blood with a Petrine cross. Integra made a face that clearly said she was sickened by what she was seeing. The victims' heads have been ripped off, messages are left on the wall written in blood. This is an offense against God and Christendom. They mock our church, country, and Helsing itself. At this point they got a report that one of the butcherings was taking place, so they all piled into their Humvee and headed towards it. The target is moving north on Route 17, butchering whole households along the way. Do not leave a single freak standing, Integra shouted. Ceres listened to the whole thing but was very nervous. She gritted her teeth and tried to settle her nerves. They suddenly stopped and were told to get out. They made their way over to their different positions to take out the threats, each having their own vampire to kill. Naruto found his vampire easy enough. He was raiding the fridge, eating a raw steak. Wow, and I thought my manners needed work, Naruto said, clearly disgusted with the vampire when he saw that it had been eating the steak but had also, somehow, managed to slobber all over himself. The vampire turned to him and then gave a massive grin and was about to speak when he heard gunshots and his brother scream. He then heard his brother laugh manically and then he grinned again. He then gained a worried look on his face when he heard his brother scream in pain. He was about to go and help him when Naruto ran in front of him and unsheathed his katanas. I wouldn't do that if I was you, Naruto said with a smirk in place. He just loved messing with his opponent when he knew that they would screw up when he did. And that was exactly what the vampire did. He screamed in anger and ran at Naruto like a dumb ass. Here is where the idiot forgot something very important. A blade, no matter what kind, is generally sharp. When he tried to rush past Naruto, swung one of his katana and bisected him at the waist. Naruto then walked over to where Morgana was and looked at her kill. All that was left was a blood cross on the wall. They just grinned at each other and then walked outside to give Ceres advice. Along the way Morgana admired Naruto's kill. Intestines were coming out of both halves of the body and he clearly suffered before he finally died. The kill was so sadistic and bloody actually made Morgana want to kiss him right on the lips. This train of thought was quickly stopped by the extremely small cautious side of her mind. She was a monster. What human could be with a monster? 1. They made their way through the kitchen and out the back door where they both went straight to the roof where Sarah's was trying to get a shot for her target. Eventually Morgana got tired of waiting and asked, "What are you waiting for?" "Do it," Morgana loudly said. It wasn't quite a yell, but she was obviously not happy with the fact that her fledgling was hesitating. "Sir, she's already 600 meters away," Sarah stated. She didn't know how she was supposed to make a shot like this when she has nearly every factor working against her. "Imagine a third eye on your forehead. Aim from there. If you shoot like a human, you're going to miss like a human," Morgana said. She was starting to get annoyed with having to explain everything to her fledgling. She could understand if she had one or two questions, but to have a question about every single fucking thing. She figured out all of her power within about 20 minutes. She was always a very quick learner, so she shouldn't expect anyone to understand these things right away, but damn, figure some of this shit out yourself. Naruto, after hearing the human comment, couldn't stop the "he" that came out of his mouth after he heard that comment. He was human, and whenever he took a shot he hit his mark, usually. Morgana shot him an apologetic look. "I didn't mean you were incapable. You have proved you are very capable. I meant that most humans need several handicaps or artificial enhancements to even come close to fighting on par with a vampire." At this point Sarah's made her presence known again. "But ma'am," she was quickly cut off by Morgana. "Aim right for her heart. Don't worry, you'll put the bullet right through her," she told Sarah's. "But it's so dark and I don't have a scope," Sarah's said. "That's a human complaint." Naruto was about to make another comment, but Morgana said a quick, "Not you," to just get it out of the way before they had another little disagreement. Morgana grinned hugely, her mouth filled with sharp teeth, and then began speaking again. "It's time you take the shot like a proper vampire." Sarah's eyes suddenly went from their usual blue to a blood red, and she took her shot and it plowed straight through the heart of the only female vampire among their targets. Sarah's eyes went back to their normal blue. She was incredibly surprised that she had made the shot, but surprise was easily overshadowed by fear. "It's such a big gun, but I hardly feel any recoil at all. It's pitch black, but I can see more clearly than in daylight." Morgana suddenly spoke, stopping Sarah's from talking to herself any more than she already had. "Good shooting, police girl." Sarah's suddenly began talking to herself again. "And now I'm hearing voices, like some sort of telepathy. It's all too fast. What on earth am I becoming?" She slowly lowered her gun and lifted her gloved hand and stared at it. She eventually lowered her hand and looked up to stare at the moon. Morgana knew that Sarah's was thinking had figured out how to be a vampire, but she quickly corrected her. "Not yet, this is only the beginning and you've a long road ahead of you," Morgana told her. She didn't want Sarah's to think that just because she was able to see like a vampire once, she was able to fight like a proper vampire whenever she wanted. Naruto, however, felt the need to reassure her. "Don't worry, we'll help you whenever we can. We've all had to learn to control something that we had that set us apart from other people. What I'm saying is that we can and will help," he said, with Morgana behind him giving a small smile and nodding her head once to show that what Naruto said was true for the both of them. After this was done, they all began to pack up and head home. Integra was in her office looking over the files of the recent vampire attacks. There were dozens, over 50 more than there usually was. Integra knew that this hadn't happened for a very long time. For a very long time. Too many. Far too many. Suddenly we have far too many vampires causing trouble. Third and fourth-rate vampires killing randomly, keeping us busy. Pointless, cheap, pathetic acts of barbarism. It's as if someone were turning out vampires off a factory line. This had only happened once in history, and that was back during World War II. This couldn't be the Nazis again, could it? Integra was busy trying to find the source of all of the pathetic vampires that were attacking random places when Morgana came into her office. Needless to say, she was surprised. Morgana never left the basement dungeon unless she was going on a mission or protecting the manor. Actually, it was just when she could kill something and not get in trouble. For Morgana to be here, it must be important, but if that were true, then why would she have a confused look on her face? The two stared at each other in silence until Integra finally broke the silence. "What do you need, Morgana?" Morgana sighed and answered. "It's about Naruto." Integra was curious now. "What's the problem with him?" Morgana hesitated for a second. She didn't want to get Naruto in trouble, but she got her nerve to tell her master and finally answered. Well, there isn't exactly a problem. Whenever I am around him I start to feel strange around him, but it's not a bad feeling. It's more of a burning feeling but without any pain. Morgana was immensely confused. She really didn't know what she was feeling, but she liked it for some reason.
Integra, on the other hand, couldn't stop the huge grin from growing on her face.
Morgana was her very good friend. Not on a very emotional level, but when she was growing up Morgana taught her when she needed to be a hard ass and how to do it. She knew exactly what Morgana was feeling. She just had to know one more thing before she told Morgana what was happening to her. Let me ask you something. The burning feeling, is it in your chest and stomach when you're around Naruto or when he comes to mind?
Morgana thought for a moment. Yes, it's only when he is involved.
Morgana was beginning to feel better. Integra knew what the problem was. Integra grew a huge happy smile for her friend, servant. Morgana, I know exactly what's going on with you. Morgana was getting impatient. At this point you are too, aren't you? Well, what's going on? Morgana asked impatiently. Integra finally gave her answer with a grin. Morgana, you are in love with Naruto. Morgana was shocked at that answer. What, I'm in love? How can I be in love? Integra was very amused with what Morgana was saying. So you're saying that you don't want to be in love? Integra asked. She had to be honest, she was enjoying this immensely. Morgana's reply came very quickly. No, that's not it at all. I don't have the slightest idea of how to get someone to love me or how to show love. All I know how to do is fight. Integra gave her friend another grin. Don't worry at all. When the time is right you will be able to tell him yourself. Integra answered. Morgana had gotten her question answered, so she left the room to begin thinking on the time to tell Naruto how she feels. It was a sunny day in Rome and all was peaceful, well, for the most part. Now both of you stop that. There's no fighting between friends. How do you expect to go to heaven acting like that? A kind-looking priest said as he broke up a fight between two 8-year-olds. He was tall and had tanned skin. He had short blonde hair and a large scar coming up from his jaw to just under his eye. He also had a slight stubble and glasses over his green eyes. This man's name was Alexander Anderson.
One of the little boys quickly apologized. Sorry, father.
The man sighed once and then said, listen, violence is never the right answer, except when used against heathens and monsters. He added at the end. Then the man noticed an old-looking priest walking over to him and quickly told the kids. All right, I want both of you to run straight up to your rooms.
The boys gave a quick, yes father, and left. The two men slowly started walking along a path. Anderson asked, to what do I owe this visit? What happened? The older man answered as blunt as possible. I'm afraid we've been hearing a lot of bad news lately, coming from England. Anderson stopped walking and turned around, a grin forming on his face. Yeah, they're working hard to keep everything quiet. Ah, vampires, the old man said.
Anderson's grin grew even larger. Then the old man started talking again. There have recently been multiple vampire attacks within their borders. Far too many to be pure coincidence. At this point Anderson was in the shadow of the trees and his grin was truly frightening. Well, nothing wrong with that, is there? If a vampire wants to eat some Protestants, how is that any of our business? The old man answered, but there's more. Helsing, they are a problem. They've been holding a stronger front than we expected, keeping damage to a minimum. Anderson answered with confidence, his grin still in place. They're nothing but amateur. Helsing is practically a kindergarten compared to us. The Catholics, the Vatican, and the Iscariots. We were fighting against the forces of darkness centuries before the Helsing organization even existed. So why are you here? If all the trouble's over in then surely the English can take care of it on their own. The old man answered in a grave tone. But it's not just in England. Anderson's eyes widened and he answered in a shocked voice. What? The old man answered, there's been an attack in Ireland, Northern Ireland. A little town called Badrick. Helsing is on the move and we will not just sit back and watch. Anderson grew a grin again and answered, the nerve of them, sneaking around where they're not wanted, like they belong there. These fools are as shameless and presumptuous as ever. The old man answered menacingly, we will teach them to know their place, Anderson. They tread on Catholic land. This vampire is ours to destroy. We want you to deal with this before they do. Anderson grinned and asked, and if I should run into the agents of Helsing? It was obvious the answer he was hoping for. The old man answered, just remember, we are part of God's divine instrument on earth. We do not retreat when we are challenged by heretics. Anderson's grin returned and then some. If anyone does not love the Lord Jesus Christ, let him be accursed at his coming. God save you from your fate. Amen. Morgana, Naruto, and Ceres were immediately sent out to Badrick when they heard of the vampire attack that killed the entire town. They were in a hotel and blasting away at the ghouls that were in their way to the vampire they came to kill. Naruto and Morgan were just tearing through their way through the undead slaves, but Ceres was more reluctant to kill them. Ceres was trying to motivate herself to kill the freaks, but some of the things that she was saying to herself were bordering on the line of stupidity. They're not real people. They might as well be zombie pumpkins. They're just dolls. Take aim. One shot and it's over. With this said, she finally had the nerve to start shooting the ghouls. She let loose several shots, each one being a kill shot. Once all of the ghouls were dead, she started running to the location she believed her mistress was at. Along the way she ran across a ghoul with a mini Uzi. It shot at her, but she quickly took care of the undead slave with a well-placed shot to the head. As it fell, Ceres just ran over it and quickly shot a ghoul that was just behind the first one. She quickly began shooting at the ghouls behind them. Although no one was there to see it, Ceres' eyes began to turn blood red. She began shooting at whatever part of the ghouls she could see. A ghoul was getting up but was quickly ended by Morgana shooting it in the head. She quickly told Ceres her problem. Police girl, make sure you hit them in the heart or the head. Just remember, these people did not become undead ghouls by choice. There's no way to cure them once they've been changed. It's for their own sake you put them to rest as quickly as possible. Ceres' gunshots began to go about 5 times faster and the ghoul fell with each gunshot. Ceres quickly released the empty clip from her rifle and reached for her spare clip when she looked behind her at Morgana. Her eyes were blood red again and she had a crazed look on her face, clearly said that she was absolutely blood crazed. She also seemed to be mentally crazed as well, if you were to go by how she was talking. Yes, my mistress. Oh, you're definitely crazy. Morgana did nothing but grin and chuckle a little. At this point nearly every door in the hall opened and ghouls came out of each and every one of them, and to make matters even worse, they were each carrying a firearm. Ceres just cocked her gun and gave a crazed grin. Ceres then charged and the ghouls began firing. Ceres just weaved in and out of the bullets and then slid feet first and took out all of the ghouls with a rapid fire spray of bullets from her gun. However, on the last ghoul ran out of ammo and slid right by it. She quickly ran up to it and slammed her fist into its forehead. It dropped to the ground, but Ceres wasn't done there. She slammed her foot down on its head and, her grin growing even larger and crazier, pressed down until its head splattered. Morgana was pleased with this and spoke her approval. Now you're starting to understand what it is to be a vampire. Ceres was panting and staring at the blood on her gloved hand and was slowly bringing it to her head to take a drink when suddenly. Nah, I'm just kiddin', we're just going over to see what Naruto was doing while this was going on. Naruto was foregoing the use of his guns in favor of his katana. His reasoning for doing this: he only had a set number of bullets and you don't need to reload a sword. All of the ghouls' attempts to kill him were easily avoided by either a substitution or shooting clones instead of the real him. When all of the vampires were dead, he managed to make his way to the attic, where the vampire was. When he got there, he saw the vampire boasting about how he was unbeatable to a tall man with blonde hair, a large scar on his face, wire-frame glasses, and wielding what looked like long bayonets. He quickly made his presence known with his older style of combat. Run his mouth first and then fight. Well, this is certainly a surprise, he said, gaining the attention of both people. We were sent to kill the vampire here and I find the dumbass spouting about how he was invincible. Do you have any idea how many people that are now dead have gone on and on about crap like that? I can easily name 3 people right now if I wanted to. Really, he could. Gato, Dodo, Sasuke. Anderson. While he would have normally been angry someone had interrupted his fight, even if it hadn't happened yet, he was intrigued by this young man. He was soaked in blood, but it was obvious none of it was his. He then saw his swords and gained a huge grin. Well, it's good to see someone else using the old-fashioned method of killing these freaks.
Naruto looked at him and gave a grin that clearly said, friendly but cautious. Well, I have guns, but my argument to people that are against using swords is that if you use a sword you don't have to worry about running out of ammo. Anderson's grin came back even bigger than before. Well, it's good to know that some of the Hellsing organization have brains. Say boy, I have a proposition for you. How would you like to leave the kindergarten and come and work for the scholars? Anderson really hoped he said yes. It was very difficult to find good, capable vampire killers these days, and even fewer used swords. Naruto's grin grew until it nearly split his face. You make a very good offer, but I have a few reasons that I would want to stay with Hellsing. Anderson's grin fell. Oh really, and what might those be? Naruto grinned and answered with certainty. Well, for starters, there isn't just a bunch of old guys with no combat experience giving hardworking, if slightly crazy. No offense. None taken. Agents' orders that could easily get them killed. Then there's the fact that the police girls' reactions to just about everything are freaking hilarious. The third reason, Naruto suddenly gained a small blush, is Morgana. Anderson was about to speak, but the vampire had began to feel ignored. Hey, I'm the threat, pay attention to me.
Anderson and Naruto just looked at each other for a second and then exploded into a 5-minute-long fit of laughter. After they were done, they both had to wipe their eyes. I don't know what kind of abilities this boy has, but the way he holds himself just screams, capable fighter, and I am the best vampire killer that the Vatican has to offer. What makes you think you have the slightest chance against either of us? The vampire's response to this was to scream in rage and rush at both of them. He did not get the result he was hoping for. Naruto had sliced him from shoulder to hip on the right and Anderson mirrored it on the left. Naruto cleaned his blades and was about to speak to Anderson when he noticed that he was alone. He quickly realized that Anderson was going after Morgana and Sarah's and ran off to try to stop anyone from dying. Shing. A blade went straight through Sarah's throat, tip first, straight through the back of Sarah's neck. Her eyes went wide and she started gasping. Morgana had a similar reaction. Then 10 more blades went straight through her torso. She fell to the ground with a groan. Morgana watched this and then gritted her teeth because her fledgling was about to become a proper vampire and she was stopped just a lick short. She then noticed the holy symbols on the swords and realized it was a blessed blade. Then hundreds of glowing pages appeared and nailed themselves to the wall. A barrier. Then she heard footsteps and turned her attention away from her injured fledgling to the origin of the noise. There was blood dripping to the ground. Anderson slowly walked down the stairs, his bayonets and cross necklace gleaming in the moonlight. He got to the bottom of the stairs and then decided to stand right in front of a window. Then he started saying lines from the Bible. We are the servants of God and the messengers of his justice. We are the instruments of his divine wrath on earth. We are called upon to cleanse his kingdom, bringing ash from the flesh of thine enemies. He then proceeded to place his blades together and create sparks by grinding them together. Praise to our Lord. Inside the Hellsing Manor, an employee was telling Integra something what was terrible. Sir, a report from our Vatican intelligence officer. It reads, our fear is confirmed. The Vatican Special Operations Iscariot organization is on the move. Integra was very unhappy about this. Iscariot, the Vatican's Special Operations Unit. The most powerful agents the Vatican commands. Professional exorcists, assassins trained to deal with heathens and heretics. They're working under Sector 13. Why is it always 13? A black operations unit. How large a force did they send? Integra asked. If they sent out more than 30, getting enough troops there to deal with it. The man answered in a grave tone. Just one agent was deployed. The paladin, Father Alexander Anderson. Integra was hoping to God that she had misheard the man or he was messing with her. Did you say Alexander Anderson? God knows what would happen if he were to run into Alucard and the girl. Everyone's eyes widened at the possibilities. I'll leave for Badrick immediately. Fetch my gun, my sword, and 2 bodyguards, Integra ordered. The man did nothing but bow, give a quick, yes sir, and left the room. Integra turned to Walter. Walter, I want you to keep working on the Vatican. Walter gave a quick reply. Of course, sir.
Integra was in the helicopter with Walter, giving all of the information they had on Anderson.
Paladin Anderson, Executioner Anderson, Bayonet Anderson, Off with its head Anderson, Dust to Dust Anderson. Place of birth unknown, age unknown. Even his origins remain unknown. The only fact we can nail down is that he is an expert monster hunter. In much the way Morgana is our best form of supernatural defense, Anderson can reasonably be described as the finest agent Vatican Section 13 has to offer.
Integra's helicopter took off and she began talking to herself. The Paladin Monster Slayer, the Purifier. God, I hope they haven't started killing each other yet, and with Naruto thrown into the confrontation, who knows what will happen. Anderson was slowly walking to each other, both knowing one hell of a fight was going to break out. Anderson broke the silence. Beautiful moon tonight, isn't it?
Morgana was in no mood for any banter or games. Where is the vampire we were hunting and where is the man that was with? The last part was asked with an almost unnoticeable amount of worry. Normally this level of concern would seem like someone hardly cares, but this is from someone who didn't feel any remorse, as she had millions of people run through with pikes. In short terms, she was fucking worried.
Anderson, however, caught the tone in her voice and decided to use it to his advantage. Dumbass, you don't piss off a woman that has the power to destroy an entire country by herself. Spiky hair, whiskered cheeks, 2 katanas and 2 desert eagles. Morgana did nothing but nod. Naruto had just caught up with Anderson and was about to confront him, but he then started hearing their conversation and decided to wait and see what would happen. If worse come to worse, he would start fighting too. He was about to see that that wouldn't be necessary. He would also hear something that would change his relationship with Morgana forever. Hint hint. Again.
Anderson grew a grin that was freakishly huge. Well, he made short work of the vampire, but I made short work of him. He thought that he had broken her. Normally he would have preferred to have a good fight, but he thought that breaking her emotionally was good enough. He didn't get the result that he was hoping for.
At first it seemed like he had broken her. Tears of blood cascaded down her eyes at the thought of Naruto being dead, but then all of the pain she felt turned into rage, and there is a reason the term, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She didn't even bother to talk anymore, she just dropped her guns, ran up to him and started beating the holy shit out of him.
Anderson didn't know what was happening until it finally stopped, and when it did, his bones were essentially powder. His organs had become little more than jelly. His glasses were destroyed, along with the top half of his head being torn clear off. The worst part of it all, though, was that he was still alive because of his status as a regenerator. It wasn't anywhere near enough to heal him, but it was just enough to keep him alive. He defiantly did not think this one through.
Morgana was in a blood rage of her own, but she had experience dealing with them, so she could stop beating the shit out of him long enough to start strangling him and yelling at him, never noticing that Naruto had walked down the stairs and was just staring at the scene in front of him with wide eyes. What she yelled in her rage.
However, she would never have yelled under any circumstances if she knew Naruto was alive. You killed him. He was the only person that ever showed me kindness without wanting something in return. I actually cared about him, and I hardly care about anyone, and you killed him. He actually made me feel alive again. Tears began streaming down her eyes even more than before. Her voice began to tremble as she spoke again, this time quietly. He was the only person that I have ever loved. Naruto went wide-eyed when he heard this and decided to start speaking. I'm not dead, Morgana. Morgana was overwhelmed by happiness and ran up to Naruto and hugged him. Then she noticed 2 things. 1, she had said out loud that she loved Naruto and he heard her, and 2, she was hugging him at the moment. She shot off of Naruto with a full-body blush and quickly started looking at the wall. Naruto was about to say something when Sarah's made her presence known again with a loud groan. Both Naruto and Morgana turned their attention to Sarah's and began pulling the blades out. When the last one was out, they proceeded to exit the building, but when they got outside, Naruto stopped and told them to wait a second, then went back inside, undressed Anderson and put a dead female ghoul over his crotch. When he's found, the reaction will be hilarious. They were wondering how they would all get back when they saw Integra's helicopter land on the roof and run down the floors. The 3 field agents ran back inside and began making their way to Integra, and they found her and the 2 men she brought with her laughing their asses off at Anderson, and when Morgana, Sarah's and Naruto saw this, they joined in on the laughter. When they finally got all of the laughter out of their system, they all went back to the helicopter and went back to the Helsing Manor,
When they got there, Morgana asked to talk to Naruto alone on the roof. Morgana didn't know what to say at first, but she finally found what she needed to say. "Naruto, what you heard at the hospital was true. I just didn't know how to tell you. I have done nothing but fight for as long as I have existed. I don't know how to show love." Naruto rolled his eyes, closed the distance between himself and Morgana, and kissed her right on the lips. Integra was watching using the security camera and couldn't stop herself from smiling. Her good friend had finally found a good amount of happiness. Naruto and Morgana finally stopped wrestling with their mouths after about 5 minutes and pulled back. They stared into each other's eyes, and then they both went down to the dungeon and spent the rest of the night together. Before you go on about how Anderson would just try to kill Naruto, let's keep in mind that Naruto is human and peace-loving-ish. The sword thing helped, but the real big thing that won over Anderson was Naruto's natural likability. We all know that Naruto could make friends with a tree if he tried to. Anderson will also never know that Naruto undressed him either. I almost forgot about something. The werewolves. I love the captain in Hellsing and his powers. Naruto has always had some animal qualities about him. So my proposal is this. Naruto gets turned into a natural werewolf instead of a vampire. I'll work it in one way or another, and I promise it won't be completely stupid either. I could make it so he goes through the process that made the original werewolf and give him powers similar to Morgana, or have him fight the captain and the captain's blood mixing with his in the presence of his shitload o chakra made him a werewolf. I can make it work. These were just off the top of my head. Oh, and I want this to happen, and I am the author, so Naruto being a natural werewolf now has 2 votes. That is what I really want to do, but those 2 votes are all the werewolf idea will get from me. Hellsing is owned by Kutra Hirano and Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto. I don't own anything.
Naruto woke up before Morgana and was a bit confused at first, but then he remembered what Morgana and him had done last night, won, and laid back down, and the largest grin possible appeared on his face. Right before he closed his eyes, however, he noticed something that worried him slightly. There was a clock on the wall and it read 11 p.m., one late for most people but get up time for the night owls of the Hellsing organization. They needed to get up to be ready for any mission that may pop up. Naruto turned his gaze away from the clock and looked at Morgana. She was wearing a nightgown that hugged her figure and outlined every curve of her body. Naruto had no idea what he did to deserve her, but he wasn't going to question something as good as Morgana happening to him. She had a large smile on her face even though she was asleep. It wasn't her usual shark-toothed smile. It was a soft, genuine, happy smile. Normally, Morgana could make you crap your pants with just a glance, but right now she looked like one of the most innocent and peaceful people in the world. The only thing that bothered him, if only slightly, was that they were sleeping in a large, cushioned coffin, big enough for 2 people. Naruto looked at this and grinned. He had finally found happiness. As long as he was with Morgana, he didn't have to worry about anything. He had a great day with her before they decided to get some sleep around 3 in the afternoon. They had both had a good day. Morgana had gotten a new gun and Naruto had gotten some armor that was made to change its shape to fit him no matter what. Hey, if they could enslave someone to a family bloodline, then they can make armor that changes a bit. But what really made it a good day for the both of them was the fact that they were able to go on a walk in the park without something getting blown up or Morgana killed anyone. Naruto, on the other hand, shattered a grand total of 17 jaws and broke about 23 noses. A lot of guys stared at Morgana in lust and then they laid at the ground in pain after Naruto was done. Morgana thought this was sweet but unnecessary. Of course Walter knew about their walk but could do nothing about it, and there was no way to describe how angry and jealous he was. Naruto's thoughts were disturbed by a hole being blown through the wall and a man with long, blonde hair, glasses, and a white suit walked in. He was accompanied by a man with silver hair, dark skin, yellow eyes, and he was wearing what looked like a Nazi captain's uniform. What he didn't know was that Walter was waiting for his chance to kill him if the captain couldn't do it, or he may just join in with the captain. The explosion also happened to woke up Morgana, who thankfully formed clothing around herself before sitting up. What's going on?" she asked, half awake. Earlier that day Ceres's eyes were twitching and she was doing everything in her power to not go down to her master's dungeon and issue a screaming match. The reason she was so angry, well, Morgana had asked Walter to replace Ceres's bed with a coffin, and like a good little bitch he did it with a smile on his face.
Sarah's managed to restrain herself from interrupting her mistress' sleep, and Naruto's even if she didn't know it, but unfortunately for Walter he was the one that was on the receiving end of her anger. "Walter, what the hell is this thing?" Sarah's shouted at the end with a look that basically said, "What the hell?" Walter's answer was a bit on the smartass side. "That thing you're referring to is a coffin." Y'all, it was actually on the far end of the smartass side. Sarah's was not happy with the answer and she let Walter know through gritted teeth. "I know. Why is there a coffin in my bedroom?" She was on the verge of kicking his ass. Saying she was pissed was putting it lightly. She was ready to try blood for the first time and her target would be Walter. Walter, however, saved his ass with what he said next. "Oh, it's here on orders from Sir Integra." Walter then proceeded to do a terrible impression of Integra. "We can't have a vampire who doesn't sleep in a coffin. So there you are," Walter said with a sense of finality. Sarah's just stared at Walter and, in a voice that just about promised pain, asked, "What have you done with my bed?" Walter took about 10 steps back in half of a second. "I had it disposed of course." Sarah's slumped forward slightly and just thought about how much she already missed her bed. Then the anger came back and she screamed loud enough to shake the manor. She voiced her anger more after her scream with a shout of, "Walter rrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr was sweating because he knew if she didn't like his next answer then she would probably kill him. He answered as quickly as possible, "Fine if it helps." The orders were confirmed by Morgana as well. This was probably the one thing that saved him. Ceres snapped out of her rage in a fraction of a second. "Mistress?" she asked while sounding confused. Walter, feeling safer, answered in a calm tone, "Yes, since you're still refusing to drink blood like a proper vampire, you will slowly become weaker. You must now sleep in a coffin filled with the soil of your birthplace. This smallest of concessions is the only way to keep up your strength." Ceres was obviously unhappy, judging by her staring at the ground, but it was also clear that she accepted if Morgana had ordered it. Walter, not liking the fledgling of the one he desires, but will never get, dumbass, asked, "I take it you still feeling unconformable with the situation, Morgana then decided to walk in and voice her opinion. "You're an idiot. I never said it was nice." Ceres audibly gulped and let out a surprised, "Mistress?" Morgana just stood there with her arms crossed under her breasts.
Naruto came up and hugged her from behind and, being his unserious, goofy self at the moment, shouted, "On Naruto."
Walter was good at hiding his anger, otherwise the blonde would have gotten a stink eye, death glare, and snarl all rolled into one.
Morgana, however, just turned around and pulled Naruto into a kiss that lasted a good 5 minutes, that left Walter with steam coming out of his ears and gritted teeth, and Ceres was doing a good impression of a tomato. When they were done trying to suck each other's air out of their lungs, they both turned to Ceres and Morgana started telling her why she was an idiot. "You chose the night. Once you've turned your back on the light of day, all the sunlight should mean to you is smoldering pain and a slow death."
Ceres just stood where she was, looked like a scolded child, and took the verbal beating.
Morgana, deciding that Ceres had gotten the point, gave her a small smile and started walking across the room, with Naruto quickly entering and moving to walk right next to her. Walter, seeing them both walking in his direction, walked over to a table that had 2 cases, one that was small, the other was very large. He tried to be as pleasant as possible when he was talking to Morgana and, because Morgana was around, Naruto. "Good evening, Morgana, Naruto." Morgana was said with as much charm as possible. "Disgusting old goat," and Naruto was said as toneless as possible. "I have something special for each of you. You as well, Miss Victoria." This caught everyone's attention. Morgana went over and opened her case first. She gave an intrigued, "Oh, what is this?" as she saw the pistol in the case. Walter answered with pride, "The Jackal, a custom 13mm anti-freak combat pistol. It fires custom-made rounds. Far more powerful than the 454 Castle rounds you're used to. 39 centimeters long, 16 kilograms in weight, 6 rounds per magazine. The Jackal has more firepower than any human can be expected to handle." Morgana wanted a little more information than she had at the moment. "And the rounds?" Walter answered proudly, 13mm explosive shells. Morgana knew this was just going to get better and better. "Casings?" Walter answered her question with a grin on his face, "Pure Macedonian silver."
Morgana had just one more question before her opinion on her new gun was complete. And the tips, explosive or mercury? Walter knew that she loved the gun before he answered, mercury tips and they're already blessed. Morgana couldn't find anything wrong with the gun in any way. It's perfection, Walter. She couldn't wait to use this gun on that bastard that made her think that Naruto was dead, even if it was only for a couple of minutes. Walter gained a huge grin and bowed. I'm pleased that you're pleased, ma'am. Morgana looked at the gun and grinned. I'm going to enjoy using this beauty to shoot Father Anderson's limbs off. Ceres was trying to observe the jackal from every angle while going on about how amazing it is. Oh my god, mistress, that's amazing. See. Walter decided that he might as well give Ceres her gift. Now, Miss Victoria, I believe I have something special for you as well. Ceres was very excited to see what weapon she would get, but when she saw what it was, the excitement was replaced by shock. Walter was standing with an enormous cannon that was taller than he was. The Harkonnen, a 30mm anti-freak cannon, designed to be used with both depleted uranium shells and exploding incendiary shells. This weapon will destroy all but the most heavily armored of targets. Walter seemed very pleased with himself, but Ceres was horrified that people expected her to use this cannon, and she let her position be known. What the hell is that? Naruto couldn't stop from laughing at Ceres's reaction, but when Walter turned to him he noticed the hatred for him in his eyes, but he kept quiet about it. He was then led to the last and biggest box. Naruto, you will be given some armor that can stretch and grow no matter what stress it is put under while still maintaining comfort and strength. It also has an amazing ability to turn itself into a plain black t-shirt. The armor was amazing. It had what looked like tribal marks on the upper left and right on the chest plate. It had a kilt attached to the bottom that was obviously there to allow easy maneuverability while still offering a little more protection, as well as giving the wearer the option of concealing a weapon. 2. I can't really explain the design that well. If you don't like my description, check the picture on my profile, but it's being worn by Naruto's werewolf form. And Sir Integra wanted you to have this silver dagger in case you have no other weapon.
Naruto couldn't help but grin when he held the dagger. It wasn't a kunai, but it came with a sense of nostalgia. He proceeded to put the dagger in his pocket. Walter, however, then pulled out his guns. By the request of Sir Integra, I've also upgraded your Desert Eagles. They can now blow a hole straight through a tank. It was then that Naruto noticed a pair of gloves next to the armor. What about the gloves? Walter gave them a glance and told him, they are based on Morgana's ability to store things in shadows. Unfortunately, this is as far as it can go because nothing will stabilize the shadow enough to store anything larger than a sword. Normally this would still be very useful, but they are also incredibly hard to make. Your blades will be by your side every second. Let it be known, even if he was a jealous idiot, Walter knew his weaponry. Naruto was impressed with his new armor and improved guns, and he let this be known. I can't think of any way to improve anything any more than it is now. Morgana chose to voice her opinion on everything. These are all perfect, Walter. They all play to our strengths. Walter gave a grin. I'm glad you approve, Morgana. I may get you yet, my dear. Walter said, but thought to himself at the end. Dumbass. Naruto then reminded Morgan of what they were planning on doing. Morgana, we still need to ask Integra if we can go for a walk. Morgana had almost forgotten when she was given her new toy. Oh right, Ceres, I want you to familiarize yourself with that cannon while we are gone. Ceres, still not liking the cannon, just groaned and gave a disappointed, yes mistress, and walked out with her new weapon. Naruto turned to Morgana and said, well, let's go and ask Integra about our walk. Morgana didn't answer. She just walked toward out the door, and Naruto followed right behind her out the door. When everyone was gone, Walter began growling and punched the wall. I'll kill you for taking my happiness, Naruto. He then went to make a call. Even if I have to betray the Hellsing organization to do it. He muttered darkly. Integra was preparing for the round table conference when Naruto and Morgana walked in. What do you want? Integra hoped it was quick. She had a lot of things to stress out about today. Naruto was the one to answer her question. We were hoping we could go for a date in the park. Integra was surprised by this but wasn't going to stop them. By all means, go have fun, you two, she said with a grin. Naruto and Morgana both smiled at each other and left to the park. Naruto and Morgana were enjoying themselves at the park. They had already gone and seen the gardens and had taken a walk through the trail in the woods that lead back to the park. The only thing they didn't like was all of the men that attempted to flirt with Morgana. Each one was quickly shut up by a strong punch to the face by Naruto. The sound of crunching was a clear indicator that he had broken either a nose or a jaw. They had both enjoyed their time together, and then they saw something that they both thought would be great, a large lake with a boat rental shop. Naruto almost killed the man who worked there with how he was staring at Morgana. After they had gotten their boat, Naruto began paddling out while Morgana just enjoyed the scenery. She looked at the water and gained a sad look, which Naruto noticed. "Morgana, what's wrong?" Naruto asked in concern. Morgana looked at Naruto and sighed. "I'm just thinking about the past. Things always seemed like nothing could ever really matter. I moved from one master to another, but now not only do I love my master like a sister, I've finally found someone that I really love, and I know that one day he will die." Naruto sighed. He knew this would happen eventually. "Morgana, I am still very young. I won't be dying anytime soon. I will be with you for a very long time." Morgana felt a little better about her situation and decided to live in the moment for now. "Alright, let's enjoy our day." Eventually Naruto and Morgana were done on the boat and made their way through the rest of the park. Naruto surprised Morgana by pulling out his new gloves, and from the right, he pulled out a bowl of ramen. "It's Naruto, you're not surprised," and from his left was a bottle of AB-type blood, Morgana's favorite. This was enough to get him a kiss that was bordering on inappropriate in public. While they were eating, Naruto and Morgana were talking about each other's past. They were currently laughing about the day before Naruto's genin exam. "So you managed to paint a giant mountain with faces carved into it in broad daylight and no one noticed until you were done?" Morgana asked with an enormously amused look on her face. Naruto, grinning and laughing about it, said, "Not only that, but it took them forever to catch me too." Morgana smiled at Naruto and began telling a story of her own. "You should have seen Sir Integra when she saw my true form for the first time. She knew I was a woman the second she laid eyes on me. I have no idea how, but she has always been able to tell when someone was lying about anything. Her blood woke me up and I defended her from her crazed uncle. He was about to kill her just so he could gain the title of the leader of the Hellsing organization. I disarmed him, but Integra ordered me to stop before I killed him. I was confused at first, but then she told me she wanted to do it herself. I was both surprised and pleased that she was willing to kill him even though he was a member of her family. After she had shot him, I got a real surprise. She pointed her gun at me and told me to show my true form. I kneeled down and I told her that the form I was in was what I actually look like, but she got about a foot away from me and told me she knew I was lying. She then ordered me to take my true form, and when I did, she looked down to see what was pushing against her chest. When she saw that it was my breasts, she jumped back blushing and shouting to stop messing with her and show her my true form. I then began explaining to her why I had used a male form for so long. She understood, and ever since then we have actually been very good friends. Walter was still working for Hellsing at the time, and when he saw my real form he got a huge blush on his face and passed out. He's had a crush on me ever since that day," Morgana said with a laugh. Naruto laughed through the whole thing, but when she began talking about Walter loving her, his laughter began to die down. He had some serious concerns about Walter and he had to tell Morgana. One of which was the fact that he was always staring at Morgana with a small amount of love but a lot of lust. Not to mention what he had found in the kilt that was on his armor. Naruto sighed. He wished his comrades would stop trying to kill him. "Morgana, there's something you need to know about Walter. Whenever your back is turned, he looks at you with lust in his eyes. This pisses me off, but I let it go because he wasn't hurting anyone, but what he did to my armor makes it obvious something needs to be done. Morgana, Walter put a small amount of explosives in my armor. It wouldn't be enough to hurt anyone 3 or 4 feet away, but if I was wearing the armor, the explosion would be enough to blow my legs off." Naruto told her, hoping that hearing that her friend was trying to kill him. Morgana looked at him with a shocked look on her face. She knew that Naruto wasn't one to lie. She wasn't even all that surprised that Walter lusted after her. What really surprised her was the fact that Walter would go as far as try to kill Naruto just so he wasn't in the way of Walter's attempts, even if they would never be more than attempts, to have a chance to get her to love him. She voiced her thoughts on the matter. I can't believe Walter would go that far just to make sure he had a chance to get me to love him. Even if it would be impossible for me to love him. Naruto just sighed and asked Morgana, well, we know that Walter has tried to kill me. So what do you think we should do to make sure it doesn't happen ever again? Tell Sir Integra. Morgana nodded, that would be the best choice. I wish he hadn't done something so stupid, but if he is going to try to kill Hellsing members to get what he wants, he will need to be stopped by execution. Naruto just nodded and tried to lighten the mood so they could get back to their great day. Hey, let's forget about this for now and get back to our date. Morgana gave Naruto a small smile and they both went back to enjoying their meals. Naruto was watching Morgana drink her blood and asked something that he was curious about. Hey Morgana, do you ever miss eating normal food? Morgana was surprised by this question, but she still answered, well, sometimes I do, but I have grown to live with it. Naruto finally had something he could do for Morgana. He could find a way to make it possible for her to eat normal food again. When they finished eating, they stayed to watch the sunset. As they stared at the falling, they looked at each other and leaned into another kiss. When the sun was finally down, they decided that they needed to start heading back to the manor, but when they got to the edge of the park, 5 men jumped out of the bushes. The apparent leader began talking with a smirk on his face. Well, look what we have here. A bastard and a bitch with huge tits. Normally we would kill you and take everything on you, but if you drop your shit and leave the bitch behind, we'll let you go. He said while pulling out a knife and trying to look threatening. Morgana was about to make a comment about how pathetic they were when Naruto, enraged that this idiot talked about raping Morgana. He knew Morgana could take care of herself easily, but that didn't do anything for his anger. He suddenly disappeared and reappeared a second later. Another second later, the thugs were all on the ground with caved-in skulls. Thankfully they were known for doing crap like this, so no one would really care. Morgana was completely aware that Naruto knew she could take care of herself, but she also knew what rage looked like, and when the thugs said they were going to rape her, yeah, good luck with that. The look on Naruto's face told her that he was well beyond pissed. Comparing how angry Naruto was to normal anger was like comparing a lit match to the sun.
Naruto stood in the middle of the knocked out or dead thugs and tried to get his anger under control. How dare these little bastards threaten to rape Morgana? Morgana walked up to him and began calming him down. Naruto, it's okay. I'm all right and those men are dead or unconscious. Naruto was calming down quickly. All right. Let's get back to the manor before anything else happens. When they got back to the manor, they went straight to Integra and began telling her about the situation with Walter. Integra was disturbed greatly. Walter's actually willing to kill you just because you two love each other. I never would have guessed that he was this crazy. Naruto was wondering what they would do. What do you think you will do with Walter? Integra sighed and answered with a sad tone. I suppose we don't have another choice. If Walter is going to be attacking Hellsing members, then he has to be taken care of. Naruto and Morgana both nodded their heads solemnly and decided to get some sleep. They were both about to leave when Naruto remembered something. Morgana, I want to talk to Sir Integra for a minute. Morgana was wondering why he wanted to talk to Integra for a second, but shrugged her shoulders and left. If he didn't want her to be there when they talked, it must be something he didn't want her to hear. She wasn't going to pry, she trusted him. Integra was curious as to what Naruto wanted to talk about as well. So Naruto, what do you need? Naruto was slightly hesitant at first, Integra noted. She would ask later. Naruto began talking. Well, Morgana and I have been spending a lot of time together, and in the line of work I used to be in, and am still in, I suppose. Your life expectancy wasn't exactly very high, so if you got married young, nobody blamed you. The point I'm trying to make is that I want to marry Morgana. I want to know if we can use the Hellsing Manor for the wedding. If she says yes, and do you know any good jewelry stores? Naruto said with absolute certainty. Integra was a bit shocked, but she quickly grew a large smile. Well, you have been together for a few months. A little short, but you do make a few good points. All right. You can use the Hellsing Manor to get married if she says yes, and you can also use this. She handed him her personal credit card. To buy her ring. I haven't paid you at all, and you've done plenty of work that's worth more than food and board. Think of the cost of the wedding rings as the rest of your pay. Oh, and if you want to get her a very good ring, go to the Polished Stone jewelry store. It's not very big, but their work is unbeatable. She answered with a grin. Naruto grinned and thanked her about 10 times.
made a shadow clone, sent it to get the nicest ring the polished stone had, and went outside to see Morgana waiting a few doors down. He went over to her and they both headed for their room.
They got downstairs and began getting ready to go to sleep.
Naruto took off his shirt and pants and began putting on a pair of cloth shorts. When he turned around he saw Morgana in a nightgown that made it possible to see every curve of her body. Naruto just stared. And stared. And then stared some more with a stupid look on his face. Morgana couldn't stop a laugh from escaping her mouth. She then led him to the coffin, stupid look still on his face, and when they were both inside she proceeded to close it and snuggled up close to him. 2.
They had forgotten that Walter had access to the room where the feeds from the security cameras all went.
The round table conference had just started. One of the men there, feeling like he was entitled to speak however he wanted without any consequences, the situation must be impossibly dire if you have the gall to convene a round table conference. Am I right, Sir Integra? He asked in a high and mighty tone, as if he were the one in charge of the Helsing organization. Prick.
Integra ignored just about everything he just said for the sake of getting him away from her quicker. Yes. Another man, one much more humble and worried for people's safety, asked, civilian reports of vampire attacks on British soil have been rising steadily over the past few months. Another one spoke up as well, we can't keep this quiet for much longer.
Someone else spoke up in a warning tone, there are limits to the information we can suppress. What is going on, Sir Integra? Integra finally able to her 2 bits in. We have been conducting a thorough investigation into the matter and finally we have come across our first solid piece of evidence. After she said this she pulled out a microchip and held it in front of her face.
One man, getting impatient with the silence, said, and what is that supposed to be? Integra answered his question in an even tone, a transmitter, possibly much more. We've been finding these microchips embedded within the vampires. These chips seem to relay information regarding the creature's physical and mental state, movements and altercations. The one that asked the question stood up and shouted, "Good God!" Integra continued, these attacks are not random. There's someone creating these vampires, controlling them, moving towards some unknown purpose. Integra paused to pick up one of her cigars. And that's not all, it gets worse. There was a cry of, what? But the man was silenced when someone else told Integra, please go on. Integra answered with a tone that clearly said, this is worse than you think, these are different. She stopped to light her cigar. Traditionally ghouls come from the corpses of deflowered men and women once they've been drained of blood by a vampire, but not anymore.
During these last few incidents, not one new vampire has been created. Even young boys and girls, who are clearly virgins, have become ghouls instead of vampires. Also, the traditional ghouls we've encountered in the past do not survive the destruction of their host, but during the Badrick indecent Vatican agent Anderson claimed to have destroyed the vampire well before our arrival. The vampire had already been dispatched and yet the ghouls still walked. The first man who talked, yes, the prick, spoke up again, so what does it all mean? Integra answered with brutal honesty. We are at war against a conspiracy of vampire experts and they're displaying remarkable skill. Gentlemen, the enemy is just like us. Laughter was all one could hear on the road to the Helsing Manor. It was coming from someone that looked like a real punk, given his choice of clothing and numerous piercings. You had to feel sympathy for the 2 walking next to him. The man on his left was wearing a white suit, had long blonde hair and skin that was 1 step away of bleach white. This man was Luke Valentine. The man on his left had dark skin, dull red eyes, and silver hair. He also seemed to be wearing a Nazi captain uniform. This man was Hans Gunch and he was currently trying to prevent himself from strangling Jan, who wouldn't stop laughing like a mental patient who has had too much to drink. Ha 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 ha, so this dude's friend, I mean he's a real doctor but does the cosmetic shit on the side right. So then that same crazy fuck with the horn comes back but now he wants a plexiglass plate for his skull and the doctor fucking does it. He makes a window, you can see the fucker's brain and shit. The guy's got a monster horn and his head meat on display. The guy's a freak, I mean what the fuck. Ya get it. Luke, wanting to both save his brother from being killed by the captain and shut up his brother, suddenly said, shut up. This stream of drivel pours from your mouth before every job. Can we, just this once, try for quiet, focused, and cool. He really wanted his dumbass brother to shut up for once in his life before he got himself killed, either by the enemy or by an annoyed captain. Jan however wouldn't shut his trap. Yeah, I got it. Same shit, I know. Fucking a bro. Luke again tried to tell his brother how important it was to get this job done. Failure is not an option. Luke knew that failure meant he was dead, from the enemy or his chip activating.
Jan, however, was an arrogant retard. Oh please, I could pull this job in my goddamn sleep. For that matter, the captain could do this entire thing on his own, so why are we all here?
Luke answered his stupid brother, because they recently got another operative that showed great skill and speed when he killed our little guinea pig. We will need backup for this.
Jan, not liking to be reminded that someone could kill him, shouted, I could easily kill the fucker before he even knew what happened.
Unfortunately, they were in front of the guards at this point. The officers reached for their guns but stopped when the captain quickly brought out both of his 2 broom handles, and shot both of the guards in the head. In the background you could hear Luke smacking Jan in the back of the head and calling him an idiot.
Luke, after he finished berating his brother, just sighed and said, let's just get this job over with. Get those ghouls out here. The doors on a bus suddenly exploded and out walked dozens of ghouls in police riot gear. They started walking over to the 3 men at the gate, and when they got there they stood at attention.
Jan suddenly grabbed 2 submachine guns and shouted, listen up maggots. You know how the plan goes. You make the kill, you drink the spill. And if you run into Morgana or that Helsing biatch, don't stop until they're dead, dead. He shouted at the end. They were all making their way towards the manor and they were going to kill them all or die trying.
The lights were buzzing and dimming randomly. The round table conference began shouting in worry.
One man, aka Prick, suddenly shouted, calm down. Sir Integra, what's going on? Then the phone went off and the man on the other end suddenly shouted, Sir Integra, this is Control Room 1. Integra started shouting at the man on the other line, what's happened, report. The man on the other line shouted, we're under attack. It's an unknown enemy. Integra was outraged by this, what? The man continued, all outside communication has been cut off. We're currently exchanging fire at the front entrance. Integra went right into leader mode, hold the line. Buy as much time as you can. The ma on the other line shouted, yes ma'am. Integra began shouting into the phone, officer, I need details, how many, who are we fighting? The officer came back on the phone, the enemy, oh god, the enemy are ghouls. The men, sort of, 4 at the round table conference started shouting and panicking. All of the men in the halls were firing at the ghouls but they just kept coming even when a ghoul's head was hanging by a few veins. The men were all falling one by one. Jan was walking down the halls just itching to kill something. When guards began running at him he decided to treat it like a video game, up, down, left. Right, left, right. Bringing the motherfucking death by Konami. Oh, I am so fucking hard right now. He seriously says this. Luke just tried to ignore his brother but wound up looking down a hall that seemed to have strange purple and orange mist coming down it. He waited for all of the ghouls to pass before he started talking to the captain, who was at the back to prevent himself from killing Jan just to shut him up.
Luke and the captain looked at each other and they both thought the same thing. Go down this hall to get away from the retarded, psychopathic, dumbass. They both quickly walked down the hall. Integra was enraged, an army, a ghoul army. The idiots in the room with her began to shout ideas, we need to buy time. One particularly snobbish bastard suddenly said, first priority is our evacuation. Secure a path to the heliport. Suddenly there was a dull explosion and dust began falling from the ceiling. One man shouted, what happened? What was that? Suddenly the man on the phone came back on, I'm afraid that was the heliport, sir.
The man that suggested using it shouted, what? Integra was calm and simply told him, this is a very well-planned attack.
The man on the phone came on again, Sir Integra, we can't keep this position much longer. Jesus.
Integra was worried for her men, hello. Jan suddenly came on the phone instead of the officer, hello. Is this thing on? Cool. This message is going out to the Round Table Conference and a very heartfelt shout out to the Queen Bitch herself, Miss Helsing. Alright, your ass is currently being kicked by the Valentine brothers. My name's Jan Valentine and I can't wait to meet each and every one of you.
We'll be getting intimate as soon as me and the boys finish lunch.
Let me be the first to thank you for providing all these tasty snacks. By tomorrow Helsing will be nothing but a pile of shit. You've got nowhere left to run and nowhere to hide. Now I'm going to kill you. I want to see you cry and beg. In the meantime I highly recommend pissing yourself followed by a course of praying to your impotent god, but hey. There's always enough time to be a man and kill yourself. Thank you London. We love you. Good night.
Integra was biting her lip to prevent herself from shouting at the bastard. The members of the Round Table began shouting again. What do you plan to do about this, Integra? He said the ghouls have taken over the estate.
Integra suddenly started talking calmly. They're coming for us. What's worse, we have a security leak.
One of the idiots started shouting, damn it Integra.
Integra ignored the idiot and dialed the phone for Sarah's room. When Sarah's answered the phone, Integra immediately began giving orders. Police girl, I need you to find a way to get to us and bring your cannon and rifle. Sarah's was confused as hell. She couldn't hear anything from upstairs except the intercom. What do you mean, ma'am? Integra quickly explained the situation. The mansion is being overrun by ghouls and a couple of brothers known as the Valentine brothers. Sarah's quickly started using her police training. Then that means the hallways are out. She took a second to think and then she came up with something. The air ducts. I can easily get through them. Integra grinned. She knew Sarah's police training would come in handy. Alright, get here as quick as possible. Yes sir, came Sarah's quick reply. She took the grate off the vent in her room, grabbed the Harkonnen and her rifle and headed into the vents. Luke and the captain were walking down the hall, towards what? They didn't know, but they knew it was away from Jan. Luke lit a cigarette and stopped to look at a picture on the wall, but suddenly spikes shot out and almost speared him. He managed to ditch his jacket to fool whoever launched the trap and disappeared along with the captain. Suddenly 3 officers came out from behind an archway and went to see if they had gotten the enemy. When they saw that it was just a jacket, they lowered their heads in disappointment. Suddenly an orange glow went straight through one of the guards. He was fine for a second, but then his head split in two and Luke reappeared behind him. The other officer was about to shoot at him, but suddenly the captain, who had been on the ceiling, stomped on the officer. Suddenly a secret entrance behind a mirror opened and a bunch of guards came running out. They were quickly killed by either the captain punching holes through their torsos or Luke slicing them to pieces. Suddenly Luke's phone went off and he just knew it was Jan because he was already getting a headache. He answered the phone with a sigh. What? Jan sat down on a pile of dead guards. Yo, Luke, what up? Can you hear me? No. This is your brother Jan Valentine, commander of the army of the undead Helsing Slayers. Oh yeah, letting you know that floors 1 and 2 are secure. Now all that's left is to take the 3rd floor, crash the Round Table Conference, and kick the shit out of a little girl and a bunch of old people. Luke was getting tired of his brother's constant rambling about pointless crap. Just stick to the plan. Don't give them an inch. I think the captain and I heading for the basement. Luke hung up the phone, but when he did he saw a spot of blood on his suit. He just wiped it off and said, "Time to see what you can really do, Morgana," he said as his eyes flashed blood red. Jan was sitting at Integra's desk, lighting up one of her cigars with his feet up on her desk. He suddenly said, "Fuck, these are some fine cigars. I mean, come on. That's just fucked up. People starving in the world and she's wasting money on this. A slow agonizing death is too good for that stick-up-her-ass bitch. I think it's time someone gave her an old-fashioned, working-class, ass-kicking." He then proceeded to kick down the door and continued to the conference room. What's going on? Morgana asked, half awake. The first thing she saw when she woke up were the 2 men in the gaping hole in the wall. She quickly got out, followed by Naruto. They both got up, but Naruto looked down and saw his pants from yesterday. He discreetly reached down and got the dagger out of his pocket. He had a feeling he would need it. Luke began talking to Morgana while Naruto and the captain, being men of combat, ran off and began exchanging blows. Luke bowed and began talking to Morgana. "It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Morgana.
My name is Luke Valentine. I'm a really big fan of your work. One of the cowards in the conference room ran up to Integra and shouted, "What the hell's going on?" Integra calmly pushed her glasses closer to her eyes. They're closing in and fast. They've taken the first 2 floors as well as the roof. Escape is impossible. The man that shouted at her suddenly shouted again while pointing at her, like he could order her, "Just do something. You're responsible for this." This was too much for one of the more sensible men. "Sir Penwood, this is neither the time or place for such behavior. I believe that what Sir Integra is trying to say is that when the time comes we will be left to fend for ourselves. Is that correct?" he asked Integra.
She just nodded, "Yes, sir." The idiot that started the whole thing just sat down and began sobbing, "And they're ghouls, aren't they, and they're armed to the teeth. We're all going to die." He never noticed the panel on the ceiling right above him start to move. He did, however, when it fell on his head and when Sarah's landed on his head.
Sarah's quickly got up and started asking questions. "Are you all right, Sir Integra?"
Integra just nodded. Sarah's sighed in relief and said, "Good. Now I saw the ghouls heading this way with a large amount of ghouls. Luckily though the halls are narrow enough that they have to be close together, so when I use an exploding round with the Harkonnen, the explosion or the shrapnel will kill the ghouls. Anything left I can kill with my rifle."
With this said, Sarah's quickly left and began setting up her shot to hit Jan.
Jan was headed for the conference room and he was calling down the hall to try to frighten Integra. "Little Helsing chickie. We're coming to find you. Come on out and play Little Helsing. I promise it's going to be a lot of fun. I just want to torture you, kill you, maybe skullfuck your corpse a couple of times, burn the house to the ground, go home, and masturbate. Okay." He just kept walking toward the meeting room, never noticing the door at the end of the hall open slightly. All he heard was the boom from Sarah's cannon and then he couldn't feel his arm anymore, but the real surprise was when the round went straight through 10 rows of ghouls and then exploded, sending shrapnel through the hearts or heads of all but a few ghouls. Jan just stared. He couldn't believe that a single shot had destroyed almost all of his ghouls. While he stared like an idiot, Sarah's ran up and killed the ghouls by using the Harkonnen as a club. This snapped Jan out of his stupor and he started yelling at Sarah's like a dumbass, "You bitch, you'll pay for that." He then tried to run at Sarah's and punch her with his remaining arm, but his hands was blown off by a shot from Sarah's rifle.
Jan again yelled something retarded, "I'll kill you, bitch."
Yeah, he can kill her with no arms. He jumped back to the entrance and kicked down the double doors to reveal that all of the Helsing officers had become ghouls. This pissed Sarah's off. She got out her rifle and unloaded clip after clip into the ghouls to kill them as quickly as possible. When she ran out of ammo, she ran up and took out the 3 dozen that were left. This all happened within the span of 30 seconds and Jan was about to crap his pants. Before Jan could say something stupid, Sarah's covered his mouth with her hand and, with her other, grabbed him by the neck and proceeded to drag him to the conference room. With all of the ghouls dead, she could just walk to the conference room without any interference. When she got there though, she had about 12 guns pointed at her. Her reaction wasn't a big surprise. She screamed and pulled Jan in front of her. When everyone saw that Sarah's had gotten Jan and disarmed him, haha, bad pun, they all lowered their guns. Integra walked up to Sarah's and told her that she did a great job and began interrogating Jan. "All right, let's start with who your bosses are." Jan, however, just laughed and struggled to his feet. Even if he did manage to do this, he needed the wall to get himself up and keep himself there. After he finished laughing, he began telling them, "I'm about to die and you think you can get information out of me? My bosses can hear everything we're saying. You think they're gonna let me live?" Right after he said this, he burst into blue flames. "See, I so fucking told you. Well, since I'm fucked, why don't I piss a little wisdom on you dipshits? You can take this clue and shove it up your ass, bitch." He flipped them off and shouted, "Beware the millennium." He then became nothing but ash. Integra was angry that all she got out of him was millennium. Suddenly Integra remembered something. Wait, he said that he had a brother. Where is he? Back in the basement. Luke kept talking to Morgana. "Your name gets thrown around a lot, Morgana. Hey, the things people say. They tell stories about your amazing strength, grace, and beauty. How you glide through oceans of blood. They call you Night Walker. Beyond human. A monster whose power radiates with a darkness that casts a shadow on darkness itself. Finally I get to know if there's anything more to you than rumor. When I was human I feared you, the stories anyway, and when I gave up being human, when I became this, I began to admire you. You, the first great pioneer of immortality. No matter what any of us do, really we're all just chasing you, Shadow. Morgana couldn't stop a grin from forming on her face. This dumbass tried to make himself seem smart, but he was as stupid as those thugs in the park were. That's ridiculous, you fool. There's no such thing as immortality. Luke just answered in a smug tone, yes I know, and when I have your head on a stick everyone else will know it too. So now I get to kill you and make my wildest dreams come true. On an unspoken signal they both pulled out their guns and began shooting at each other.
Naruto and the captain were fighting each other with everything they had. Their battle was taking them throughout the basement and they were headed for a secret escape route that led to a clearing in the woods. Naruto was out of ammo and his katanas had been broken by the captain putting a bullet through each of them.
The captain had run out of ammo and they were just trading blows at the moment. They were both looking for any opening they could find, but neither could find one. For every move one made the other had a way to counter. When the captain transformed, Naruto used his shadow clones. When Naruto used his Rasengan, the captain's regeneration kicked in and healed whatever damage he took. Something had to tip the scale in someone's favor. That something turned out to be Walter. He jumped out from behind a pillar and stood in between the two fighters. No one knew what he was going to do, but when he shot his wires at Naruto it was clear what his intentions were. The captain normally wouldn't have ganged up on someone, but he knew that he may have to fight Walter after this fight was over, so he needed all of the strength he could spare. Naruto was worried now. He had to get out of this cramped place. Thanks to his wires, Walter was deadly in a narrow area, and this hallway definitely fell into that category. He looked around to try to find a way to get outside when he saw a wooden trap door on the ceiling. He jumped for it and burst through the top. The full moon was out, so he would have an easy time seeing. The captain jumped through the door and Walter used his wires to attach himself to a tree to pull himself up. Naruto knew that he needed to find a way to beat them both. He quickly thought over everything he knew about his opponents. The captain was obviously a werewolf, so he could be killed with silver, but what did he have that's silver? Wait, the dagger. It was still in his pocket. That could work, but what about Walter? He was old, made good weapons, and he used monomolecular wire as his weapon of choice. His thoughts were cut off when Walter sent out his wires to try to kill Naruto before he could do any more fighting. He ducked out of the way and charged at Walter while bringing out the dagger to stab Walter in the head. He succeeded, but he didn't get away unharmed. Walter, in an attempt to save himself, had sent his right-handed wires at Naruto's dagger and the ones on his left at Naruto's neck. The wires went through the dagger like butter and continued and sliced into his torso. The wires that went for his neck didn't get far enough to wrap around it, but they did slice deeply into his throat. He would probably die from the wounds. Walter was dead, but he still had to deal with the captain. The captain began beating the crap out of him. He didn't have the energy to keep up with him anymore. He was doing all he could to think of some way to kill the captain. He was already dead. He'd find a way to take this bastard down with him. Then he remembered the knife. He looked at the pieces and thought he could use them to kill the captain, but he couldn't get them through his heart now that he couldn't stab it into him. The only thing that had gotten through his skin was his Rasengan. Wait. The Rasengan grinds. Naruto picked up the shards of the silver dagger and began making a Rasengan. As it formed, the silver ground up into dust and turned the Rasengan a grayish-white, and with his last shot prepared he ran at the captain. He was surprised that Naruto just abandoned all reasoning and charged at him with a ball of silver light. When he finally realized what was happening, it was too late. Naruto shoved the silver Rasengan straight through the captain's heart, spraying his blood all over Naruto's wounds. The captain couldn't believe he was dying, but as he thought about it he started grinning and then started laughing, even when he burst into blue flames. He had finally found an opponent that could kill him in combat. The captain may have been happy with his death, but Naruto wasn't ready to die. As he tried to stem the bleeding and get back to the trapdoor, he thought about the people he had come to enjoy seeing so much every day. Sarah's, Integra, and especially Morgana. He didn't want to die yet. Suddenly Naruto's clone had dispersed itself and he got its memories. It had gotten a truly beautiful ring to use to propose to Morgana. Just one more reason he couldn't die. As Naruto got to the center of the clearing, his energy finally gave out and he collapsed. However, what Naruto didn't know was the story of how the first werewolf was created. 5. As the moonlight was shining down on Naruto, his skin darkened, he lost what little body fat he had, and his hair became more and more silver until there was only a little blonde color left. His wounds were all healing as if they were never even there. 6. After this was all done, the real surprise happened. His body began getting covered in silver fur. His muscles bulged and morphed. His legs twisted and crunched until he had the hind legs of a wolf. His entire head became the same as a wolf's, with teeth as sharp as daggers and easily 1,000 times stronger. He also grew a tail and his nails on his hands and feet lengthened and sharpened. The biggest surprise, however, was his fur. There was tribal markings in his fur. 7. After this happened, Naruto began waking up. He tried to rub his face but his hand hit something before his hands reached his eyes. He quickly opened his eyes and looked down. He stared at his muzzle for a few seconds and then screamed. The first thing he noticed was that his voice was deeper. Not overly so, but it had a natural growl to it. After he calmed down, or at least as much as he was going to get, he began examining the rest of his body. He looked behind him and saw his tail. He tried to move it and got a result that clearly said he had complete control over it. He looked down and was shocked when he saw his legs. He was freaked out at first, but then he noticed how easy it felt to walk around. He wasn't even aware of it aside from the moving scenery. He decided to see how fast he could move. He shot off and ran from one side of the clearing to the other in less than a fraction of a second. He grinned, which given his new wolf head would be scary as shit, and decided to see how strong he was. He went over to a huge tree, ate and lifted it straight out of the ground, roots and all, with one hand. He looked at his hands to see his claws and decided to see how sharp they were. He went over to another tree and swung his claws at it. For a second nothing happened, but then the entire tree fell over.
Naruto just grinned again, but then he remembered that Morgana was fighting someone. His grin grew into a huge grin. He wanted to watch. He then started running towards the manor. What to him was a slow jog, 1,000 miles per hour.
Morgana and Luke were attempting to blow holes in each other. Morgana just regenerated all the damage that was done to her, but Luke was avoiding everything ever that Morgana shot at him. Morgana knew they weren't getting anywhere, but Luke was under the impression that he was winning. He was also shouting like an idiot, "You've never seen anything like me before. I was designed to surpass you in every way. I was born to be your death." Luke sped over to Morgana and pointed a gun at her head. But his eyes widened in surprise when he saw she had her gun pressed against his heart. He jumped off as fast as he could, nearly getting himself shot before he could move. He jumped back and the entire thing went right back to where they started. Luke dodged a shot from the jackal and grinned at Morgana. He was about to say something when he heard a loud explosion. He looked back and saw the amount of destruction one bullet had caused. His face gained a slightly frightened look when he saw the destruction.
A pistol, did that? Jesus, he was going to make sure to avoid that gun.
Morgana suddenly started talking to him. "Your reflexes are amazing." Luke started gritting his teeth. She was in a fight to the death and she was treating it like a game. He started shout about how much better than her he was. "I told you, I'm completely different from any creature you've ever faced before." He suddenly started grinning and pointed his gun at Morgana. "I have the sum total of all your vampiric power at my disposal, all of it and more."
Morgana just grinned and whistled in a fake impressed way. Luke became angrier at this and they both went back to shooting at each other.
After a while Luke noticed something. She's not even trying to dodge the bullets. Does she think she's indestructible? Everything has a breaking point. Morgana was getting shot but she just kept firing with a grin on her face. She may act like she's not injured but she's taking far more damage than I am. Morgana stopped firing. "I can beat her." Morgana began laughing. "Yes, excellent, I haven't had this much fun with anyone except Naruto in ages." She stopped to laugh again and the blood that was all over her as well as her gunshot wounds began to disappear and get absorbed back into her body. "What did you say your name was?"
Luke was beginning to get nervous because he realized that she was enjoying this. She wasn't making it seem like a game. To her it was a game. Even if he was getting scared and getting drenched in sweat, he still answered. It's Luke, Luke Valentine.
Morgana thought over the name for a second, Luke Valentine. It's obvious that your powers are greater than even the highest category of vampire. Morgana began releasing some of her restraints. Releasing control on restriction systems. 3, 2, 1. Approval of situation recognized, commencing the Cromwell invocation.
Ability restrictions lifted for limited use until the enemy has been rendered silent. Darkness quickly covered the entire room. Then Luke almost crapped his pants when hundreds of huge blood-red eyes opened everywhere. He was freaking out when Morgana suddenly yelled, "Now Luke Valentine, it's time to educate you on how a real vampire does battle."
Baskerville the Hellhound suddenly shot out of the dark mass, and so did his twin. Morgana also disappeared into darkness, and it all began crawling towards Luke. He proceeded to scream like a little girl and ran out of the room. Morgana was about to shoot at him when he suddenly used his speed and ran up the stairs. Morgana followed right behind him, just enjoying the chase. He went to the 3rd floor and shot through the conference room doors. Naruto had made it back to the manor in about 10 seconds. He loved how strong he felt, and the best part was now he would never have to leave Morgana alone. The grin on his muzzle grew even larger. He got to stay with Morgana forever, and he was easily thousands of times stronger and faster than he used to be. He ran inside and made his way to the conference room where everyone's scent was. He loved his new senses. The minute Luke burst through the door, he went straight for Integra to use as a hostage. Morgana normally would have kept up with him, but she hadn't moved using darkness for a very long time. She hadn't fought any strong enough opponents to use it in over 50 years. She was about to kill him when he grabbed Integra and pointed his gun her head.
He started yelling, "If anyone moves, I'll blow her head off."
He started to make his way to the door but stopped when he saw everybody move their gaze away from him and went to the door behind him. He turned around and saw a huge werewolf. He had never seen the captain's werewolf form, so he assumed it was him. He gave a sigh of relief. "Oh, Captain. I thought it was the enemy. So I suppose that blonde-haired fool is dead."
Morgana was worried at first, but what he said next caused an enormous grin to appear on her face.
The werewolf suddenly smiled a huge grin. "Not exactly. Really interesting result. Splashing monster blood all over yourself under a full moon can do when you have a slit throat, shredded torso, and energy from another dimension."
Luke was smug for a second, but when he heard what the werewolf, now obviously Naruto, said, he proceeded to do what Morgana almost made him do, crap himself. Naruto quickly grabbed the little blonde bitch's arms and proceeded to rip them off. He then burst into flames, but Naruto took an enormous bite out of Luke's shoulder. He didn't know why he did it, but he felt like he needed to. He learned why he did it when he suddenly saw all of Luke's memories. He thought, "So it's war that little freak wants, huh? I'm sure that everyone else here will happily give it to the bastard." Integra, however, wasn't happy. "Damn it. We still didn't get any information out of him." She then turned to Naruto. "And you, what happened to you?" Naruto gave her a sheepish grin and rubbed the back of his head while answering, "Well, first, that man with silver hair and I were fighting and going down a hall in the basement. We eventually made our way to the end where a wooden door was on the ceiling. We were fighting for a little while, but all of a sudden Walter showed up and started attacking me as well.
He may be old, but in a narrow area Walter has the advantage. I went through the door and they both followed. I engaged Walter first with the other man helping him. Anyway, I was getting beaten until I tried for an all-or-nothing move. I ran at him with a silver dagger and stabbed him in the head, but he had already sent his wires. The wires on his right hand had went through the dagger and continued to slice my chest, and the wires on his left went for my throat. They couldn't wrap around my neck, but they did manage to slice into my throat. Then I had to deal with the other guy. He was beating the crap out of me for a while until I came up with a Hail Mary plan. I grabbed the broken dagger pieces and used a technique that I know to grind it into dust and attack him. It worked and his blood sprayed all over me. I honestly have no idea what happened, but I wound up like this." Morgana suddenly spoke up. Having restrained her powers, "I believe I know what happened. Insert first werewolf story. The man you fought was a werewolf, and the same thing that happened to create the first werewolf happened to you. but instead of a normal wolf it was a werewolf, so I would say that Naruto would probably have powers that normal werewolves don't. She had a huge grin on her face. Not only was Naruto hundreds, if not thousands of times stronger, he also would age to be 21 and then stop aging altogether. Right then one of the men from the Round Table Conference, the useless prick, spoke up. In that case, a Cromwell initiative will be put on you. Everyone, even the other men on the council because of him saving Integra, were outraged that this man would even suggest this. Not only was he already loyal to Hellsing, so was his lover. Why would he not work for Hellsing? Integra voiced her opinion on the matter. This is ridiculous. He already works for Hellsing, and Morgana, his lover, works for us as well. Why would his loyalty be a problem? The dumbass just answered like he was in charge. That doesn't matter. He is a monster and must be controlled. Again, everyone was enraged at the idiot's choice of words, and one man suddenly stood up and shouted, "How dare you? He saved Sir Integra and you think you can then bind him into servitude? I vote that this man," he pointed at the idiot, "be thrown out of the council." Everyone quickly agreed with the man. They didn't even need to count. It was unanimous. The prick was off the council, but he wouldn't take no for an answer.
He pulled out a gun, pointed it at Integra and said, "It's time I take control of this organization. You have been driving it into the ground for years. I'll take it in the direction it needs to go in, and it starts with your end." He was about to shoot when Naruto suddenly appeared behind him with his claws extended. For a few seconds nothing happened, but then the prick suddenly fell into pieces, each no bigger than a grape. Integra sighed and started rubbing her forehead. This has been a long day for everyone. Let's all just go home and go to bed. Everyone agreed with her completely and left, except Naruto and Morgana. Naruto was staring at the remains of the would-be Hellsing usurper in hunger. 9. He didn't know why he wanted to eat the pile of gore, but he did, and it scared the crap out of him. Morgana noticed this and laughed. "Naruto, don't worry. When I first became a vampire, I was worried about drinking blood, and it got easier the more I did it. It gets easier." When she saw he was still slightly worried, she materialized a wine glass and collected the blood and put it in her glass and told him with a reassuring smile, "If it will make you feel better, I'll drink the blood with you." Naruto, feeling better, nodded, and they both went to sit against the wall. Naruto was still hesitant at first, but after he took his first bite his eyes widened and he quickly chewed, swallowed and picked up another piece. Morgana couldn't help but grin. She finally had someone that wasn't bothered by her eating habits. After all, Naruto's new appetite is a lot like her own. Now if only she could get the police girl to drink blood. When everything was eaten, they both began making their way to the basement. Morgana had jumped on Naruto's back and asked him to give her a piggyback ride because she liked how his fur felt. Naruto was about to transform back to his human form right before she did this, but he didn't care. He would do anything for Morgana at this point. She would do the same thing for him for that matter. About halfway to the basement, Morgana began pressing her huge breasts into his back. When he looked back, she had a blush on her face and she gave him a sexy grin. He knew what that grin meant and he began running to their coffin room. When he got there, she got down and shifted her clothes into her nightgown and said, "You still have to get it off me before we can have our fun." Naruto grinned and transformed into his human form. After he was done, they went over to their coffin and got ready for a night of fun.
After Naruto and Morgana were spent, they laid in the coffin covered in sweat. Morgana was snuggled up to Naruto, was getting ready to sleep. She thought she couldn't get any happier today, but Naruto was about to prove her wrong. Naruto reached between the cushions on the side of the coffin and pulled out the ring 9 his clone had bought and hidden. He gathered his courage and faced Morgana. He was even more nervous than Hinata always was around Naruto. "Morgana?" She turned to him with a look that told him she was listening. Naruto got it out as soon as possible. He pulled out the ring and quickly asked, "Will you marry me?" He somehow managed to say this in about a tenth of a second and still make himself understandable. Morgana was frozen. The last thing she expected him to do was ask her to marry him. As soon as she snapped herself out of her stupor, she, at the top of her lungs, yelled, "Yes, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." As soon as she said this, she slipped the ring on her finger and kissed Naruto full on the lips, tongue included. When they finally parted, they were both exhausted from their day, the fighting, the lovemaking, and the excitement they just went through. They went straight to sleep, both dreaming about their wedding day and honeymoon.
I would also like to say I'm sorry that I didn't update on time, but I have been helping my mom move for the past week and I haven't had much time to write. Sorry about that. One more thing. People have asked me if they will have kids and the answer to that is yes, but it will be way down the road. Naruto was so happy from the event that happened last night that he woke up with a grin on his face. When he looked over at Morgana, he saw she was smiling even if she was asleep. She had officially made him the luckiest bastard alive. He looked at the clock and noticed that they didn't have to get up for a few more hours, so he went back to sleep.
In a desert city, turned war zone, a group of men were fighting. The whole thing was a rebellion against the royal rulers of the air, and the group of men, the wild geese, were on contract for the royal family. They were doing their job when people loyal to the royal family dropped bombs close to their position. Two of the men ran to join the rest of their group. They ducked behind a stone structure and one shouted, "Tell those assholes they're supposed to bomb the other guys."
The man he was shouting at yelled back, "Inbred motherfuckers don't give a shit. They got a dozen sisters waiting at home to knock up." One man, trying to lighten the mood, little shouted, "That's not bad. It works out to like 2 a day if you don't count Sunday." Suddenly their leader shouted, "Shut up, shape up, and put your head back in the game. They dropped the bombs on us because we don't matter, we mean nothing." He suddenly turned and said with a large grin, "They blow us up and buy new ones. I think we can all agree there's no shortage of idiots willing to shoot guns for money." Suddenly someone shouted, "Captain, we've just received word that the palace has surrendered." He was shocked that they just gave up. That's just pathetic. Couldn't they at least try and put up a fight? One of the men quickly said, "I guess the civil war is over and we're out of the job, huh, Captain Bernadotte?" Captain Bernadotte just gave a small grin and answered, "I've been working on something. And how many times do I have to tell you to call me Pip?" The man groaned and told him, "Whatever, please tell me the next job isn't another sand trap." He was practically begging. One of the men from the rebellion peeked out from behind, saw that all of the wild geese were there and tried for a sneak attack. Pip saw this out of the corner of his eye and quickly threw a knife at him. The knife flew through the air and stuck itself in the man's neck. As the man fell dead, Pip answered, "There will be no sand where we're going. The next job, it's in a city of fog." He was going to enjoy working in London.
Morgana woke up before Naruto did. She looked over at him and then slowly began turning her head towards her hand. She hoped that it wasn't just a dream. When she saw the ring, she nearly shouted in happiness. It was true. She was going to marry the man of her dreams. After she calmed down a bit, she checked the clock. It was time for them to wake up. She woke him up by rubbing his shoulder. He woke up with half-lidded eyes. Morgana yawned. "What is it?" he asked. Morgana grinned and said, "It's time to get up, and I would rather my fiancé and I not be late meeting our new comrades." Naruto was awake suddenly and quickly looked at the ring on Morgana's finger. After he saw it, he let out a sigh and fell back in the coffin smiling. It wasn't a dream. "I thought I wound up not having the guts to do it." Morgana laid down with him and lifted her hand up so the ring was seen by the both of them. "You did propose last night and I said, yes. I can't think of an instant where I was happier than I am now." She had had several good and happy times over the years, but nothing came close to the thrill she got when Naruto proposed. Naruto was grinning like an idiot at this point. Everything was going great for him. He was going to marry the love of his life. He would be able to be with her for damn near ever, and he was stronger than ever. He also seemed to have grown a full foot last night for some reason. Now he was a good 6 foot 10 inches. He wanted to stay in bed with her, but he had a lot to do today, and he let Morgana know that, "Morgana, we both have a lot to do today. I need to get new swords before anything happens," and Integra said that she hired mercenaries to fill in our lack of men. "We have to go and meet them." Morgana was a bit disappointed, but she could live with it. She was going to marry the man after all. However, she had a way for them to spend more time together and for Naruto to still get his new swords. "Naruto, I think I have the perfect solution for your sword problem." After she said this, 2 claymores came out of her shadow storage. One looked like it should belong to God himself. The handle and guard were made out of gold with 3 strips of black leather on the handle. The blade was easily 6 feet long and it had symbols running along the bottom part of the blade. The other blade looked like it could belong to the devil himself. The handle looked like it was made from bone, but it was clearly some kind of metal. It had spikes on the bottom of the handle. The handle towards the blade, however, was where it really started to become demonic. It looked like the upper half of a human skeleton except for the spikes at random areas and on the skull's forehead. The blade was the most intimidating thing about it though. It was the exact same length as the other sword was convenient, isn't it? And it quickly widened towards the tip of the blade, before curving into an incredibly sharp point. Naruto stared at the blades for a few seconds before turning to Morgana and asking, "Where did you get these?" "They're amazing."
She just grinned. "Well, the first one I got from the Queen of England as a gift for killing a Nazi division that was trying to create a vampire army. It was made with a mixture of blessed silver and another mixture of chromium and tungsten. It's pretty much unbreakable and it won't dull at all. The Queen gave it to me, but she told me that I can do anything I want with it, even give it to someone. So I'm giving it to you." The other was from a demon-worshipping cult that had somehow gotten their hands on a sword from hell. They were sacrificing humans for a few years before I finally went to kill them. After they were dead, I touched the sword and something tried to take over my body. It was quickly eaten and absorbed, and all that was left was a sword made from demonic metal. It can't be broken by anything on earth. I don't use swords, except when I release every restraint. I have my own sword for when I do that, so I think using these would be a good idea. She finished with a grin at the end.
Naruto wordlessly picked up both blades and held them in his hands. He didn't know why. He'd never held claymores before, but they felt right in his hands. He swung the swords once to see how they felt and they were perfect. He grinned at Morgana and gave her a kiss while saying, "Thanks, they're perfect." Naruto suddenly grew a bloodthirsty grin, and said, "I can't wait till I can use them." Morgana couldn't hold back the enormous grin that appeared on her face. She loved Naruto the way he was, but this new battle-loving attitude of his was still something that she found, honestly, incredibly arousing. She's a vampire, what do you expect? Naruto, finally calming down and putting his new swords into his gloves, reminded her, "As great as these swords are, we still need to go and meet our new coworkers."
Morgana sighed and said a quick, "All right," and they were out the door and heading towards the room where the wild geese were assembled. The wild geese had all piled into a room in the Helsing manner. They were starting to get annoyed with not knowing what they're doing in London when they were usually in battle-torn areas. One man finally asked, "Captain Bernadotte, what are we doing here? Has a war started in London?" Another man spoke up as well, "Since when did we become security guards?" At this point someone else voiced his opinion, "Are we just stroking some fat cat's ego?" Pip just sat in his chair with a grin on his face and waited until his men were done with their complaints and finally told them, "I can't believe this. I don't know how to put this, so I'll give it to you straight. We're here to get rid of monsters." None of the men could believe what they were hearing, and one voiced his opinion, "Get rid of monsters." Two men thought Pip was messing with them. Yeah, right. Integra had just entered the room when Pip had begun talking, and she heard what his men said.
She decided to correct them. "It's true. Your enemy is a vampire who gains immortality by drinking human blood. Our job is to carry around garlic and holy water, put a stake in its heart, chop off its head, burn its corpse, and sprinkle its ashes at the crossroads. For more information, read your Bram Stoker." Integra couldn't help but grin at the end. That last bit was a little bit of a joke after all. The men, however, were still unconvinced. "That's ridiculous. There's no such thing as vampires." Integra answered with absolute certainty, "You just don't know about them. Or to be more precise, you've never been told. Formed 100 years ago, our Royal Order of Religious Knights, Helsing, has been working in secret for a long time with the intended purpose of fighting vampires. If you still don't get it, then take a good look for yourselves." As she said this, she pointed towards Sarah's, who had appeared on the wall on the far side of the room. Everyone looked at the wall and saw Sarah's standing there like she was there the entire time. She also looked like she hadn't gotten any sleep all night. Pip, not believing this, let out a surprised, "What?" and walked over to Sarah's. He gained a huge grin as he got closer. This girl looked like she wouldn't hurt a fly. He couldn't keep a straight face. Hold on a sec. You're a vampire?" Normally Sarah's would be nervous at meeting someone in this situation, but here's the thing. Sarah's isn't a morning person to begin with. Add in the fact that she hadn't gotten any sleep and she is ready to bite someone's head off. She quickly said to him, in a voice that clearly promised pain,
Yes, I am. Now go the hell away. Pip just laughs and says, if you're a vampire, then I am Frankenstein's monster. He had a massive grin on his face as he moved his arms towards Sarah's. She just flicked him on the forehead, sending his head flying back, and began flicking him in the head until, with the last flick, sent him flying back into his men.
They shouted in worry, "CC Captain." Pip sat up holding his head, shouting, "She's a monster. I didn't see it coming, not even a sign. She just poked me in the forehead and my whole head swimming. Is she really a vampire?" He was pondering all of this when Morgana's voice became heard by everyone. She began phasing through the wall, telling them, "Damn right she is. She may be the lowest of the low, but a vampire is still a vampire." As she came into the room completely, all of the men grew a perverted grin. Pip tried to be smooth despite having blood on his face. "Well, who might you be, you little angel?" Naruto, having guessed something like this would happen, walked through the wall on the other side of the room and turned into his werewolf form. He grinned and told them, "Her name is Morgana and she also happens to be my fiancée." He gained a massive grin when, with all their backs still turned to him, their shoulders all slumped and they all let out a disappointing groan. Pip looked behind him and, upon seeing Naruto, screamed and jumped a good 9 feet away. Naruto and Morgana both began roaring with laughter. Integra watched with a grin. Pip's reaction was funny and she heard the fiancé bit. When Sarah's heard the fiancé comment, she was wide awake and slack-jawed. She knew that they were together. They were the ones that kept her up last night. They were fucking loud, but to hear that they were engaged was still a shocker. Naruto, still laughing, turned back into his human form and walked over to Morgana. When he got there, he put his arm around her and, after they managed to finally get their laughter under control, looked at the gawking crowd. Naruto, after getting uncomfortable with the silence, decided to end it in a quick way and said, "All right, good talk. If you need me or Morgana, we'll be outside on the sparring grounds." They had been spending a lot of time there and they both loved every second of it. They were about to leave when Sarah snapped out of her shock and shouted, "Since when are you two engaged?" Morgana grinned and lifted the hand that had her ring on it and told her, "Since last night." Sarah suddenly went back to looking incredibly tired because of the surprise wearing off and just mumbled, "Well, good luck to the both of you. I hope you have many years of happiness." Integra walked over to the two and told them, "Congratulations you two." And Naruto, as she looked at him, her eyes gave him a glimpse into something worse than hell, a woman that had the potential to ruin his now immortal life. "If you make Morgana unhappy, I will use everything at my disposal to make your life miserable." Naruto grinned and told her, "That won't be an issue, ever." After he said this, he leaned down and kissed Morgana on the forehead. Integra, pleased with his answer, turned to the wild geese and began addressing them. "You'll be accompanying Naruto and Morgana on their missions. You'll also be guarding their coffin when they sleep." The men were freaked out for a second, and one man shouted, "Asked, they sleep in a coffin? They're insane." Integra looked at the man like he was stupid. "Morgana's a vampire and Naruto's a werewolf. Did you think they slept in a normal bed?" The man, suddenly feeling like a dumbass, didn't say anything and just sat down. Integra just turned to our resident ass-kickers and told them, "There was a piece of mail today that was extremely surprising." As she said this, she pulled out a letter. It come from the Iscariot organization. The leader of the organization, to be exact. His name is Enrico Maxwell and he is borderline insane. He wants to meet about something. We'll be leaving for the location they wanted to meet at right away. Naruto and Morgana were wondering what she found so interesting about the letter until she mentioned the sender. They both grew huge grins. This was going to be fun. After they had gotten to the museum where they were meeting, they began looking at all of the painting. Well, Integra was. Naruto and Morgana had found the broom closet. I'll leave that to your imagination. Integra was staring at a painting when she heard talking. "It's such a beautiful collection and look how well the museum has maintained everything." The talking was coming from a man with long silver hair tied into a ponytail and he was wearing a purple vest. The other man looked like he was just an assistant. They stopped and looked at Integra. After a moment of silence, the man with silver hair turned to his assistant and said, "It seems we're a bit late." "Hello. Sorry to keep you waiting." He began walking towards Integra, but she shouted, "That's far enough." He stopped with a confused look on his face as she continued, "What business does the Vatican have here? The Iscariot organization of all things. Enrico had an almost sad smile on his face as he answered, "Oh, this is no good. Looks like we're not liked here." He reached up to take off his glasses. "First, let me introduce myself. I'm Iscariot's leader, Enrico Maxwell. It's an honor to meet you."
Integra wasn't interested in flattery. "I don't care who you are. Tell me why you're here." She was ready to kick his ass after what happened in Badrick, even if the end result was hilarious.
Maxwell gave a sheepish grin and tried to dispel her anger. Now, there's no reason to get upset. We didn't come here today to fight with you."
Integra decided to be a smartass for a moment. "That's good, for you anyway. I have my 2 strongest agents here and one already destroyed Anderson," she finished with a grin. Maxwell's anger quickly spiked and he crushed his glasses in his hand. "Shut up. You got lucky. Nothing more. You will never beat Iscariot. Not you, that sow of a vampiress and that foolish man that refused to join us."
Naruto, having just walked around a corner alone because Morgana wanted to make an entrance, heard what Maxwell said, snuck up behind him and grabbed his neck and said, "I was just going to scare the crap out of you, but since you felt the need to insult my fiancé, I'm going to kick your ass instead." He pulled his arm back and was about to punch him when Maxwell tried to save his own ass.
"Anderson." And at the end of the hall Anderson suddenly appeared. However, instead of having something interesting to say, he just had a stupid look on his face. He walked up to Naruto and, to the shock of Maxwell, started asking questions. "You're going to get married to that vampire? She's an evil blood-sucking monster. How can you even consider it?" Naruto decided to ask a question that had been bugging him. "Why do you constantly say she's evil? The hell did she do that thousands of people have done in the past?"
Anderson began listing his reasons. "She drinks the blood of the innocent, has caused millions of people to lose their lives, and abandoned God." He felt that he had made his point.
Naruto quickly shot down each and everything he had said. "All right, in order. She drinks donated blood or the blood of the monsters she kills. So did disease and every psychotic leader in history, and she was about to die and she had fought in God's name her entire life. I would feel a bit pissed at him at that point too." Anderson was quickly shut up and had a stupid look on his face, too. After he shook off the shock, he turned to him and said, "All right, fine, but that doesn't mean I won't be getting payback for the state she left me in at Badrick." Anderson, while angry, had to agree with him. "Fine, but don't do it again."
Naruto just grinned and nodded his head. While this whole thing was happening, Maxwell was just watching with his mouth wide open like an idiot. Integra was trying not to laugh, and Morgana, having walked out of the wall to just stare at what she was happening in front of her. Anderson was supposed to be as crazy as Maxwell, but he was having a normal-ish conversation with Naruto.
Maxwell finally found his voice and shouted, "Anderson, what the hell are you doing? Attack them."
Anderson just looked at Maxwell and told him, "Why would I do that? He made a good point and there's a tour of old Japanese people coming this way." He pointed down the hall and, sure enough, there was a bunch of old Japanese people making their way to their location.
Integra, finally having enough of the stupidity, told Maxwell, "Well, I think we're done here, so let's go to the garden before you make yourself look like more of a horse's ass." Maxwell just walked to the garden with his head down.
Anderson, Morgana and Naruto all just stared at their boss's retreating forms until Naruto finally said, "Sue, anyone kill any interesting things lately?" With this question asked, everyone began talking about their favorite fights. By the time Integra got back, Anderson, Naruto, and Morgana would all be talking like they were old friends. Integra couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So you're telling me that you helped move a group of Nazis to South America and you knew that they had attempted to create an army of vampires?"
Maxwell grinned like he had done the greatest thing in the world. "That's right. We gave them our full support. Although Anderson has never been in favor of that choice for some reason." He suddenly had his head firmly planted in the table and Integra was walking away with all of the information that the Vatican had, muttering about how stupid Iscariot was. In the back there was a small, fat German man talking to himself. "Well, that was boring and we've lost our strongest officer. Oh well, the war will be just as good as it would have been with him." By the time they had gotten back to the Helsing Manor, many things had changed. Naruto, Morgana, and Anderson all had a truce between each other where they wouldn't attempt to kill each other, but if they were ordered they would fight. Everyone knew about how retarded the Vatican was 50 years ago, and the 3 strongest people on the planet had made it clear to everyone that, if the situation called for it, they would be willing to work together. Naruto was looking out a window at the Hellsing Manor thinking about his life and past. It may have been absolutely terrible for years, but he had something here that was great and he wasn't going to let it go. While he was thinking about this, Morgana walked in and moved over to him. Naruto looked behind him and, when he saw that it was Morgana, pulled her into a kiss. After they pulled back, Morgana asked Naruto, "What are you thinking about?" Naruto gave a sigh and told her, "My past and how my life is just now getting good." Morgana, not liking the fact that Naruto was thinking about how bad his life used to be, told him, "You should forget about all of the hard parts of your past, keep the good parts in mind, and look to the future." Naruto turned to her with a grin and said, "I suppose you're right, but there's so few of them it might not be worth it. The beatings, the glares, the attempted assassinations, it might be best if I just forget about my old home altogether."
Morgana was unhappy that his life was as terrible as it was. Maybe that would be for the best if there was so few. Whatever you think is best for you, I suppose.
Just then Integra walked in. "Naruto, Morgana, you have a mission. We need you to go to South America to find all you can on Millennium. If I know how idiots like them work, they will either be trying or have tried to destroy everything related to their organization, so work as quickly as possible. Check into your hotel, get situated.
And get to work the next day so you can blend in." Naruto and Morgana grinned at each other. Go to South America, check into a hotel and have the rest of the day and night to themselves. They could do that. What Integra said next put a damper on their plans. "You'll also be taking the police girl with you." And like that it got just a little less fun. Sarah's wasn't a problem, but if she was there they wouldn't have as much time to themselves. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Naruto told her, "All right, fine. When do we leave?" Integra answered with a grin, "Right now. Sarah's is asleep, so I suggest you go and wake her up." Morgana just grinned. "Actually, I think I know a way for the police girl to get plenty of sleep." Her grin was pure evil when she said this, her shark-like teeth making the grin that much more wicked. Integra was wondering what she was talking about and Naruto was confused at first until he realized what she was planning, and he gained a grin that was just as evil as Morgana's, his mouth full of dagger-like teeth making his grin look evil. When Sarah's woke up everything seemed normal. It was dark, but that was because her coffin was closed. She tried to open it but couldn't get it open. She kept struggling to get it open and she was starting to get freaked out. "Hello, somebody open this thing." What she didn't know was that Morgana had wrapped her coffin several times over in black leather, more than enough to keep Sarah's down. Morgana, Naruto, and Pip were sitting around playing poker while their plane traveled towards their destination. They had only known each other for a few days, but they were quickly becoming very good friends. Pip understood that Morgana was going to marry Naruto, so he didn't try anything but Sarah's. You couldn't keep him away from her if you tried. He was constantly trying to get a kiss from her. At the moment Naruto and Morgana were basically trading chips. One of them won one hand and then the other would win the next. Pip learned very quickly that betting in large amounts was incredibly stupid. He lost 1/10 of his chips on the first 2 hands and began using just 1 chip per hand. He was still getting his ass kicked. He was down to 1 chip. The captain of the plane suddenly went on the speaker, "We will be arriving in Rio de Janeiro in 5 minutes. Please prepare to leave." Naruto, quickly trying to decide how they could find a winner, said, "All right, this last hand is all or nothing, deal." Morgana and Pip both agreed to this and put the rest of their chips into one last hand. Pip had gotten his ass kicked the second he picked up his hand. He literally had nothing and he couldn't pull off a bluff against these two. He sighed and accepted defeat. Morgana and Naruto, however, had both gotten a royal flush. They had to split the pot. They both began laughing, and when they had finally calmed down, Naruto said, "Well, I guess this was a tie. We'll have to continue the game in private one of these days." He leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Maybe turn it into a game of strip poker." Morgana did nothing but grin at Naruto. They all began getting off the plane and going to the 2 cars that were there to pick them up. Naruto, Morgana, and Pip all piled into an SUV and drove towards the hotel they were staying at. Sarah's coffin was loaded into the other car, a hearse, and began following them. When they got to the hotel, Morgana and Naruto quickly walked into their hotel and made their way to the front desk to check in.
The man behind the desk couldn't have been more than 20 and he was incredibly nervous. Why, you may be thinking. Well, it's because he was looking at the most beautiful woman he had ever seen and one of the most intimidating men he had ever seen. To make matters worse, they were in the same place together.
He was snapped out of his stupor when he saw Sarah's coffin being brought in and 20 men attempting to carry in Naruto and Morgana's coffin. He managed to get out. Sir, ma'am, your room is ready, you have the penthouse suite, but your luggage, we don't allow coffins in the hotel.
He was quickly cut off by Naruto suddenly saying, "It's fine. We have already talked to the owner and he has agreed to allow it." The kid behind the desk was unsure on what to do, so he called the hotel's owner to verify.
After he got off the phone with the owner telling him they paid extra to be allowed the coffin, he quickly gave them their key and watched them leave. Or at least he would have if the 20 men could lift their coffin. Naruto, after getting impatient after 5 minutes of waiting, walked over and picked the coffin up and began carrying it in one hand like it was a sack of potatoes. Naturally, everyone stared at this with wide eyes and slack jaws.
They made their way up to their room. When they were sure everyone was gone, let Sarah's out of her coffin. It was still mid-afternoon, but Sarah's hadn't gotten any sleep because she was so worried as to what was going on. Now that she knew, she promptly picked up her coffin, went as far away from Naruto and Morgana as the suite would allow, and got in her coffin and went to sleep. She wasn't exactly happy with them. She had just woken up stuck in her coffin. They never noticed a man behind a pillar, red glove to white sock. The guests has entered the hotel. I repeat, the guests has entered the hotel. Naruto and Morgana weren't tired in the least, but they had nothing to do. They grinned at each other and Naruto tackled Morgana onto their coffin. There was a large group of men in a tent with a huge amount of equipment. They were all standing around a microphone. It seemed like one man was giving orders to someone. The snipers are in place. SWAT teams Yanan and Daggerin are both ready to go. Send them in. Commence storming operations. The 3 terrorists on the top floor are heavily armed. Commence storming operations immediately. They are to be shot on sight. I repeat. Do not worry about apprehending them. The terrorists are to be shot on sight. The man stopped talking into the microphone and another man spoke up to a middle-aged looking man wearing a brown business suit that was sitting in a chair, smoking a cigar. You're okay with that, right, Mr. Tubalcain? The newly named Mr. Tubalcain just clapped his hands slowly and, with a grin on his face, told them, "Good, good, very good. You are close to granting yourselves access to the land of immortality." When Naruto woke up, the first thing he saw was lights flashing into all the windows. He looked out the window and saw what it was coming from spotlights. It also looked like hundreds of people were gathered around the front of the hotel. Naruto walked over to Morgana and shook her awake.
She woke up rubbing her eyes. What is it? He told her, "We have company. It looks like it'll be military of the human variety."
She gave a grin. Well, it looks like this is going to be fun. Naruto grinned back. Yeah, it will be. So do you want to go for the big fish or the small fries? Morgana didn't really need to think about it. I'll take the SWAT team. Maybe the police girl will get her first human kill this way.
Naruto walked over to the window. All right, let's get to it. He was about to jump out the window when Morgana yelled, "Naruto."
He quickly turned and shouted in worry, "What?" Morgana just had an amused grin on her face. "You should probably get some pants on before you head out." Naruto looked down and noticed he was still completely naked. He gave Morgana an embarrassed grin and went to get his clothes out of his bag. When he had gotten his clothes on, he started talking to Morgana again. "So, anybody I should look for specifically?" Morgana looked at him with her usual grin. "Just go for whoever looks like he shouldn't be there." Naruto gave her a grin. "All right, see you after the job's done." With this said, he made walk towards Morgana and the window. Before he got there, however, the lights went out and a helicopter with a news crew inside suddenly showed up outside one of their windows.
Thanks to Naruto and Morgana's heightened senses, they were able to hear what the news anchor was saying. This is NKT Brazil's Julio Eduardo reporting live from the Hotel Rio de Janeiro, where tensions continue to mount. Just 30 minutes ago, 2 armed terrorists killed several of the hotel's employees and guests. Pip was watching the whole thing live on TV and did a very good and long spit take, both ruining the TV and nearly choking himself to death. The news anchor continued, "They are holed up on the top floor, having taken over a dozen people hostage. Integra was on the phone with a member of the round table. Yes, with respect to that, I'll get in touch with them. She paused for a second to listen to the man on the other end of the line. No, I don't think that's the case. She stopped to listen to the angry rambling of the man on the other end of the phone. You want to go to war that badly? You're starting to sound like a warmonger. She didn't even wait to hear the response, she just slammed her phone down on the receiver. On a TV in a small room, the reporter was continuing with his report. Here's the latest on the terrorist incident at the Hotel Rio. At this point, more than 10 of the hotel's guests and employees are now confirmed dead.
Anderson was sitting in the dark watching the small TV he had in his room at his orphanage. Don't do something stupid, you two. Those men will die if they stand in your way, but don't kill more men than you have to. Integra had used the Helsing computers to hack into the security cameras at the hotel, and she was watching as 3 or 4 SWAT teams worth of men ran towards certain death. Integra knew what was going to happen the second the SWAT teams arrived on the top floor. Morgana would kill them all, and Naruto would either watch or go and kill the one that orchestrated the whole thing. Either way, it would not be pretty. Naruto and Morgana were more than ready for the SWAT team when they kicked down the door and began firing their guns.
The men just emptied as many rounds as they could. Unfortunately for them, Naruto was in front of Morgana and the bullets just bounced off of him when he was hit. The only thing it accomplished was destroying Naruto's only shirt. He looked over his shoulder at Morgana, who grinned and nodded her head at him. He smiled back and ran at the window. He jumped out of it and fell to the ground below, forming a huge crater when he landed.
Morgana looked at the SWAT team and ran at them. The following slaughter would put a smile on any psycho's face. Morgana tore off limbs, ripped organs out of bodies,
and tore out at least 5 necks. By the time she was done, there was a pile of bloody shreds on the ground and Morgana was standing in the middle of it all with a grin on her face. She hadn't had killed any normal humans in a very long. She looked over at the door and saw that the leader of the SWAT team had managed to hide and was trying to get out through the door. He saw that she was walking over to him and his efforts to open the door increased with panic. He tried everything he could think of to get the door open and get away from the monster that had destroyed the men under his command. He hadn't making any progress when Morgana had gotten over to him. He knew he was going to die and the thought terrified him. He wanted it to end quickly, so he shakily brought his pistol to his head and after a second to take in what he was about to do, he pulled the trigger. Morgana frowned at this. This coward wasn't even a dog. A dog would fight to the bitter end at least. He just killed himself before she could get a hold of him.
Although she was unhappy with the ending of her fun, she decided it was time to wake up Sarah's. Her coffin was made to be soundproof and she needed someone to wake her up so she wouldn't miss the whole thing. She needed to accept that she was a monster and killing humans would make that easier.
When she opened Sarah's coffin, she quickly shot up and began shouting just about every single word question possible. WHO, what, when, where. She was only stopped because Morgana quickly covered her mouth. Normally Morgana would have a huge grin on her face when her fledgling said something stupid, but this time it was just so random that she just stared at her with a sweat drop on the back of her head.
After she was sure Sarah's would stop talking, she moved her hand and began telling her, "It seems like the enemy has brought the fight to us. We need to head to the bottom floor and you get to pave the way." Sarah's was shocked to hear this and hoped it didn't mean what she thought it means. Can you possibly word that differently? Morgana grinned and told her, "It's exactly like it sounds. You're going to kill your first human as a vampire tonight." Sarah's was getting close to having a panic attack. Kill a human? I'm not ready for that. How will I do it? Will I be as crazy as a normal vampire after I kill someone for the first time? Will I drink all of the blood that I see? Will I stop feeling regret after I kill someone for the first time? Will I? She was finally silenced by Morgan's hand being placed over her mouth. Morgana quickly decided that it might not be the best time for Sarah's to kill her first human. All right, I'll kill them. Just stay here and wait until the gunshots stop." As soon as she said this, she opened the front door to their condo-sized room, closed it, and gunshots began to go off in rapid succession. Morgana was having a blast as usual when she was killing humans. They were just targets that exploded after all. They couldn't do anything other than shoot her, but that didn't do them any good at all. She had killed almost all of the men that were in her way to the elevator. When they were trying to close the door, she quickly hypnotized one of the men and he began clicking the up button and, With the elevator already being on the top floor, the door just opened and stayed open. The man kept clicking the button while laughing like a maniac. His comrades couldn't get him away from the buttons, so they settled for killing him and saving their own ass. They were too late as Morgana placed both her guns in between the doors and forced them open. She quickly shot everyone in the elevator and called for Sarah's. When she opened the door to the hallway, she saw her mistress at the end of the hall, but what almost made her throw up was all of the gore that was plastered all over the walls. Morgana noticed this and gave her some advice. Police girl, you need to deal with the fact that this will be an everyday occurrence for you. The only way to make it easier is to participate in the fights. She may be a monster, but that doesn't mean she was heartless, it just didn't beat anymore. Sarah's just nodded her head and, while making her way through flesh fields, she asked, Mistress, where are we going now? Morgana answered, by now Naruto will have gotten to the roof and killed the enemy, whoever that is. She said this with a grin. It would just take a few seconds to get to the roof, but what she didn't know was that Naruto had heard a little something about the Cromwell that he didn't know yet, and it made him feel more rage than he had felt in years. Naruto walked out of the crater towards the crowd in front of the hotel. He was going to freak out the whole crowd when a man in a brown business suit with a matching hat walked through the crowd.
He began talking to Naruto like he was better than him. Well, that was certainly an interesting entrance. It's good to see that there is more to Hellsing than that vampirus that's been around for so long. I should introduce myself. My name is Tubalcain Alhambra, but most people have taken to calling me the Dandy Man. Naruto gave the idiot a feral grin and said, all right, I was woken up from a very nice sleep with the love of my life, and it's obvious that you're the dumbass that's responsible, so, he disappeared and was suddenly in front of Alhambra. Let's see how long you last before you die. As he shouted this, he moved to do an axe kick, his target. Alhambra's head. Alhambra managed to dodge the kick that was going to split him down the middle. He saw the ground where his foot landed shatter, and he instantly knew that he needed to put some distance between himself and whatever this monster was. He jumped up and began running up the outside of the building, with Naruto making his hands look like claws without them actually being turned big and hairy, and he was driving his fingers into the wall and pushing off with his feet, like he was running on all fours. The men in the tent were talking amongst themselves. Mr. Tubalcain is fighting him. No way. If anything happens to him, they won't hold up their end of the bargain. They never noticed someone walk into the tent with a pistol with a silencer attached. According to our reports, he was cut off when he was shot in the head by the man. He proceeded to shoot everyone in the head, put down a good amount of explosives, and walk out of the tent. As he got out, he dropped his mask, revealing himself to be Pip, and, when he was a safe distance away, the tent exploded and everyone scattered. Pip pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and began talking to himself. Well, that's one step closer to earning my paycheck. Now, where did they put that helicopter? When they both got to the ceiling, Alhambra, trying to screw with Naruto's head to give him the edge, shouted something that would ensure that his death would be a horribly painful and bloody one. So you have a lover, huh? Which one is it, the fledgling or the Hellsing family slave? Naruto wasn't aware of this function of the Cromwell, so he asked a very simple, what the hell are you talking about? I know Sarah's wasn't turned to long ago, but Morgana isn't a slave. Alhambra grinned. He thought he had Naruto, so you didn't know. Well, that restrictor on your woman, the Cromwell Initiative I believe it's called, not only acts as restraints but it also enslaves the wearer to the family of whoever put it on. As he shouted this, he had a massive grin on his face. Seriously, why do these idiots always think they're going to win? He didn't get the reaction he was expecting. At first Naruto had a horrified look on his face, then it quickly turned from horror to disbelief, anger, and finally rage. He needed someone to take his anger out on, and unfortunately for Alhambra, he was there. First, Naruto appeared behind Alhambra and ripped open his back and ripped out his lungs. Then he reached for his ribs, and one by one ripped them out. When he was done with that, he tore his stomach out of his body, sliced it open with a claw, and put it on his head like a glove. But the finisher was the real gruesome part. He tore out his intestines, stuffed them down his throat, tied both ends into a knot, one attached to him, the other attached to a pillar, and then he pushed him off the roof where he would dangle until he finally died after he suffered for 10 more minutes. When he was finally done, he stood where he was, panting in rage. Morgana and Sarah's chose this time to arrive, and Pip got the helicopter to the roof and shouted, "Hello everyone,
I think it's time to go.
Sarah's went towards the helicopter and was about to get on when she finally saw Naruto with his rage-filled face. She looked at her mistress and discreetly pointed in his direction. When Morgana saw the look on his face, she was instantly worried. Naruto, what's wrong? The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.